Hello and welcome to Six Pack. Today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Deku had the Volukinesis Quirk? Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Everyone, be careful. The situation is particularly dangerous today, shouted Gunhead, the battle hero. In order to prevent any civilians from being caught in the crossfire, the man was serving as crowd control for the ongoing battle. Best Jeanist and Gang Orca have everything under control, Gunhead went on. The villain seems to have some sort of spatial warping quirk, and it's giving them a bit of trouble. We aren't entirely sure of its capabilities as so far, and we wouldn't want anybody to get hurt now. So please, stand back. For the average bystander, the scene was in fact rather dangerous. With all the fighting that was going on, debris flew in all directions. The villain's quirk caused destruction wherever it appeared, whether objects were being sucked in or shot out of the spatial holes. While some watched in horror at the devastation, many were gaping in shock at the battle. The majority of the assembled crowd, however, was probably just watching in wonder as heroes fought to keep the city safe from evil. Izuku Midoriya, who was 8 years old at the time, belonged to the latter. Not surprisingly, the boy was in the center of the action, silently watching and absorbing every detail of the hero and the villain. The green-headed boy watched the battle with great interest and little concern for his personal safety, barely holding himself behind the barriers that heroes had erected. In the middle of the battle, it was clear that the adversary was fighting for the first time. His wide sweeps and massive, energy-inefficient attacks were sloppy and erratic. As the heroes continued to fight, these disadvantages became evident, and the only reason he hadn't been apprehended yet was the lack of knowledge about the villain. Best Jeanist and Gang Orca maneuvered in and out of the villain's anticipated range, narrowly avoiding the unexpected spatial explosions. Fearing the worst, the heroes were unwilling to test what would happen if they were to approach one of the villain's attacks too closely. Punches were thrown, debris was blasted to pieces, and the battle continued. The heroes, however, still possessed greater experience. The disruption to the public's day was finally contained as Best Jeanist threads and Gang Orca's shrill screams made their way past the villain's defenses. Wow, so cool, Izuku cried. But what exactly was that villain's quirk? Gunhead had said that it was spatial warping, but it has to be more than that. Objects were coming through every now and then. Perhaps some sort of portal creation. But then there were those sucking attacks, like a vacuum. Portals to space, then. No, that wouldn't explain the random junk, then. Izuku started jotting down his observations of the battle right away, going over every detail he saw in his notebook while muttering. He had just reached the bottom of the page when he heard a voice behind him. "Hey kid, you all right?" Izuku turned and looked at a woman wearing a business suit. "Huh?" she asked. She had called out to him, a little alarmed by his muttering. "Was I muttering again?" The female gave a nod. Izuku said, yeah, sorry," with a sheepish tone. "I just get a little excited whenever I see a hero fight, is all. Nothing to worry about." The woman grinned and said, I know what you mean kid." The stranger then paused, taking in Izuku's appearance, before saying, "It's always a sight to see the heroes in action. But, on the other hand, I couldn't help but notice your uniform. Don't you have school or something? You'll be late if you don't hurry." Izuku's eyes grew wide with insight. "You're right, thanks miss, I've got to go." The female chuckled. "No problem kid, now get going." Izuku left the devastation caused by the villain's prank and began walking toward his school. But he was unaware that there was more wrong with the world. Even though Izuku had come to the fight alone, he wasn't really alone when he left for school. And it would be a long time before he was. For the most part, the day had been going really well. The battle with that odd villain in the morning was the first indication that the day would be better than usual. Izuku didn't come across a fight in progress very often. Usually, he simply heard about them on the news or read about them online. However, being physically present crushed all of Izuku's preconceived notions and only strengthened his determination to become a hero. Given the villain's peculiarity, it was an interesting experience that gave Izuku a pleasant problem to solve. In fact, it was something he could consider adding to his notebook for future use. Then there was school. Kachin had appeared more reserved than usual. He didn't even try to start a fight with anyone at lunch or recess. The unexpected change piqued Izuku's interest, but not enough to ask Bakugo directly. It was never a smart move. Nothing had changed since Bakugo. Izuku knew it was wishful thinking, but he was willing to believe that the world had finally chosen to give him a break. It wasn't until after school that Bakugo noticed a girl sitting on some stairs, using her peculiarity, which Izuku assumed to be some form of aerokinesis, to spin a piece of paper in the air. She had the misfortune of inadvertently hurling the paper in Bakugo's direction, causing it to fly straight into his face. At that point, Bakugo returned to his normal self. He approached the girl and started speaking down to her, accusing her of being beneath him. Naturally, Izuku stepped in because he couldn't bear for this to occur again. The sandy-haired boy screamed, "And what of it, Deku? What are you gonna do about it, huh? You don't even have a quirk." The other two boys by his side, one with wings and the other with fingers that could be extended, agreed. Like simple drones incapable of independent thought, the two always followed the explosion boy around, mindlessly obeying his commands. Izuku retorted, "But Kacchan, it's wrong. Hurting other people is bad." He was facing the girl, who had also fallen prey to Bakugo's sudden violent inclinations. The piece of paper she had been playing with was completely burned, and she was crying. Izuku had hurried in to stop his friend from trying to blow up the girl with an explosion, and he had stood tall. Bakugo kept glaring at him. Izuku made the decision to continue talking to his friend because, for once, he gave no signs of backing down. Izuku went on, "Don't you want to be a hero? You can't be one if you randomly attack people." Bakugo's gaze flickered. He stopped, a smile spreading across his face. "Shut up, you useless, quirkless Deku. What right do you have in telling me what to do?" Exclamation mark. He said. Bakugo abruptly charged up another of his explosions in his palm and let it loose directly into Izuku's face. "In fact," he said, raising his hand with lights and tiny tremors emanating from his palm, "since you're so interested in blocking her from my blast, why don't you take it instead?" Izuku fell to the floor. With no regard for her savior, the girl fled after spotting her chance for escape. Bakugo's two accomplices burst out laughing. With a stunned Izuku on the ground, Bakugo and the other two left. "Not so tough now, are you, Deku? Why don't you just crawl on home now, huh? You'd do the world a favor." Izuku lay there for a long time, listening to the rich atmosphere of the surrounding cityscape as he gazed up at the sky and watched the clouds pass by. The encounter was almost peaceful, and it might have been the only thing keeping Izuku from crying at that precise moment. Finally, he rose from his spot on the ground, though he had no idea how long it had been. A little confused by his sudden action to stand, he staggered forward a little, tripping and falling to his knees. He opened his eyes to find himself looking directly at a nearby puddle's ripples. As he gazed at his reflection, a tiny tear formed in his eye, and his breath caught. It served as a reminder of both what had recently occurred and what had been going on for a while. His face was distorted by the splash as a tear fell into the puddle. "Not just yet. All I have to do is get home. After that, I can." At his face, Izuku felt. It wasn't too horrible. It was a little red from what he'd seen, and it stung like the stings of a dozen hornets, but worse had come. Kacchan's aggression had been milder than usual, if anything. After gathering his backpack, which was the same All Might one he had owned since he began attending school, Izuku set out for home. On his walk, he considered many other things. The sound of water flowing, the wind blowing on his face, or the incessant noises of those who walked by him carelessly. Even the savory flavor of Mom's homemade katsudon. Anything to distract him from the here and now. Before long, he was standing at his apartment's door. "Mom," he called as he opened the door. There was no response. Then she must still be working. Considering the way things were going, of course. Mom has been struggling for some time. That doesn't help either. Dad has never been here, but I guess we're making it. Izuku walked slowly through the living room until he reached his room, a dimly lit space filled with All Might memorabilia and other hero items. The location served as a haven from the harsh realities of the outside world and a reminder that better things might come. He approached his bed and, with the force of a puppet stripped of its strings, fell on top of it. For a moment, he lay there, being completely engulfed by the plush surface of his bed. Shortly after, the sobs became real. Pain and hurt rushed out and slammed with full force as the metaphorical dam that had kept his emotions hidden for so long opened. "I was hurt by Kacchan once more." He didn't even think twice. Why was it so painful? Were we not once friends? Why? What was different? Have I done something wrong? It was all too much. Did I I just wish we could, Why? A shock of blackness. Two enormous creatures, circling in a limitless emptiness. Splinters and fragments were falling off one by one as it shrank ever so slightly. Every component jettisoned to and fro in a unique manner. Below, one had charted its course for its destination. Years went by, the surroundings shifted, it has achieved its goal. It came out of its hiding place similar but altered. It moved, intending once more to start the never-ending cycle of its life, but something stood in its way. A link was established, a bridge was gapped, but it was sealed and shut off just as fast. However, that was sufficient. The creature had survived. It appeared uncertain, perplexed, taking in its new environment. However, it made up its mind and fled into the unknown. It extended its hand, shifted, headed for a different location, landed, and planted itself, slightly above. Items. Millions of items. There are millions and millions of items. Beneath the earth. Up in the sky. Inside the walls. Feel, taste, smell, sound, and sight. It was excessive. Too much. Manage. Too much to bear. And then there was darkness again. Izuku jumped out of bed, and the room became eerily quiet as he took deep, labored breaths. He turned to face the window. The moon was out, the stars were twinkling, and it was dark. I dozed off. A bad dream. However, it felt so real. A mouse was killed when the cat 2 blocks away leapt on it. With 2 apartments above him, the scene changed. A woman and a man squabbled and shouted as their child fled into her room. Clumps of dirt and debris littered the underground landscape, another switch, and darkness fell. Then, from the corner of the room, he caught a glimpse of himself. Looking back at each other, Izuku saw a distorted, blurred shape that he knew to be himself. What? That is incorrect. How is it possible? In the recesses of his mind, a buzzing sound began to emerge. A steady accumulation of chitters, scratches, static, and similar sounds. He could feel them, and it was. Feel each one of them. Their hardened exteriors bump and interfere with their surroundings, their many legs drag their bodies, and their eyes swirl the world like a strange kaleidoscope. A function jammed from its task, and the buzzing begged to be released. As though in reaction to his present condition. He left it alone. And let go. He also let out a scream. They were everywhere. Spiders, hornets, bees, and ants. They entered through the open window and vents and covered the walls. They were moving toward his person from the deepest depths of the darkness, assembling in unison like an army. Then he heard another sound. There was a distant shout. Izuku, don't worry, I'm coming, baby. Panic gripped him. Mom, she was at home. Naturally, she was home, of course. She was unable to see him in this state. What would she think of the bugs, the insects? He shut his eyes, searching for an escape route. For something that would allow him to escape this nightmare. Please, 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 he pleaded. Proceed. The door slammed open. Izuku. Mom, wait, don't. However, he had sensed it, and long before the door opened, they had answered. The different creepy crawlies had fled back into the depths when he opened his eyes and discovered his mother at his door. There was no sign of their presence after they had vanished back into the darkness and the outside world. Nothing remained that would suggest anything was amiss or out of the ordinary. At the sight, Izuku remained on his bed, standing straight and staring with wide, unblinking eyes. She approached his bed, gave him a hug, and asked, Izuku, honey. Are you okay? He looked in her direction. I can't tell her, yet. The bugs, the insects. All over the sheets and walls, crawling all over, yeah, Mom. It was, just, nightmares. Oh honey, she crooned as she slowly and softly rubbed his back. I'm so sorry, but you don't need to worry now. I'm here. Yes, now everything was all right. Everything is good. The insects had vanished when Mom arrived. He would put it out of his mind for the moment. He would sleep for now. Izuku snapped out of his sleep. He yawned groggily and pulled his sheets over his body, retreating once more into the cozy embrace of sleep. Until last night's memories came flooding back. I remembered the chittering of insects and flashes of chitinous bodies. Then he shot straight up. Izuku was relieved to discover the room was empty. Nothing in particular drew his attention, aside from the assortment of All Might merchandise that was strewn across the shelves and walls. He was secure. However, then he sensed it, the faint, bubbling hum that hung in his brain. However, it was not as strong as it had been the night before. In fact, it was essentially non-existent. I wonder why. However, At this moment, the inner workings of the buzzing were irrelevant. The fact that it remained was important, taunting him, pleading to be put to use instead of being shunned and ostracized. It kept pleading, trying to get Izuku's attention. He sat there hoping it would go away and trying to ignore it. Despite his best efforts, it didn't. Izuku had thus made up his mind. Since he didn't want what had happened last night to happen again, he went up to his door and locked it. Then he sat at the foot of his bed after turning around again. He sensed the unfamiliar presence in his head. He reflected on what had happened the night before and pondered its implications. He calmed the buzzing in his head once more. From the air vent in his room, a single household centipede, a geji-geji, as he remembered his mother calling them, arrived in place of the invading swarm of the previous night. For a moment, he recoiled in horror at the sight of the creature. Halfway across the ceiling to where he sat, however, he noticed the insect had stopped moving. He thought about what he saw. It's nearly like, is it reacting to what I'm thinking? He leaned forward and inhaled deeply. He made it move with his will. It obeyed. With its many legs skittering away, the centipede crawled across the ceiling and down on top of his bed before lying in front of him. Izuku gazed at the creature, its antennae and numerous appendages standing and rigid, waiting for a command. He was still a little afraid, especially after what had happened the night before. He inhaled once more. I can't turn back now that I've come this far. He put his hand down and closed his eyes. He could feel the centipede slowly moving toward his palm as it crawled up his extended fingers. His eyes opened. He was shocked when the creature refrained from biting. The centipede actually showed no outward signs of the species, now that he thought about it. Really, not even an insect. Focusing on the organism on his palm, he poked his power once more. In response to his commands, the centipede gave a 20-armed wave, ran in circles, and reared up like a horse. His mind whirled around the display. After all, it could only mean one thing. This is, I have a peculiarity. A peculiarity. I'm not worthless. I could show Kachan to be mistaken. He had been knocked down, pushed, and beaten all those times. It no longer mattered. He might resemble All Might. He might be a hero. He threw his arms in the air, went to his computer, opened his favorite video of his idol, and celebrated by watching it repeatedly for a few minutes while he daydreamed about his future. Then he awoke from his euphoria. His stomach began to grow uneasy. He couldn't get rid of something that was lingering in the back of his mind. He had a gut feeling it was true. He remembered last night once more. He was terrified that his mother would find him completely encased in a living mass of insects. He pictured the look of terror on her face if she saw her boy covered in insects. He couldn't. This peculiarity, this ability. It was the quirk of a villain. People would never accept it because of the bugs and insects. Embrace him. Everyone was afraid of insects. They would be afraid of him and his peculiarity. He couldn't go through that again. The denial. The seclusion. Kachan was sufficient. He was already dealing with too much for him to handle. His lips released a silent gasp as he started to cry. With a quirk or not, I'm useless. It was true, Kachan. He could never be. He was startled out of his reverie by a faint tingle. The centipede was pressing its body up against his hand. Like a puppy, almost. Grinning, he traced the length of the insect's body with his finger. Thank you, he said with a sniff. He was fascinated by the centipede when he suddenly had an epiphany. Even a centipede, with its numerous wriggling legs and overall eerie appearance, had managed to console him, to bring a smile to his face. Couldn't he do the same thing? He didn't have to be a hero because of his peculiarity. Being a hero could be achieved in other ways. All I have to do is use my quirk as a backup plan. Suddenly there was a line of laughter coming from the computer. It's fine now. Why? The All Might virtual being inquired. Izuku glanced down at his new acquaintance once more. He grinned once more. Because I am here, I'll name you, Raikai. How do you feel about that? Naturally, the arthropod did not reply. However, it made no difference. The creature, a male, based on what Izuku discovered when he checked, had miraculously rescued him from his depressed state. It was the cause of his realization. Izuku owed a great deal to the insect, Raikai. He relinquished control of Raikai. Under his bed, the centipede withdrew, probably in search of other insects to eat. Izuku left him alone. There is still hope for success. He had a big smile on his face. I am capable of doing this. He shouted, Mom. Leaping from his bed, he unlocked and yanked open his door. I wanna start practicing martial arts. My destiny was to become a superhero. Izuku had spent the previous few months attending a dojo. When he first brought up the idea, his mother expressed concern, pointing out the amount of work he would need to do if he were to fulfill his wishes. He reassured her that he wanted to become a hero by doing this. Then the subject of money came up. Izuku had given careful consideration to when the subject would be brought up because he and his mother weren't particularly wealthy. He suggested that his mother stop buying him gifts for his birthdays and holidays and sell some of his All Might memorabilia. At first, his mother had flatly rejected the idea, but Izuku reassured her that this was what he desired. After a while, she gave in. Izuku leapt with delight and embraced his mother tightly. He and his mother finally found a joint dojo that was just barely within their means after weeks of tense searching. Although Silat and Eskrima were typically taught there as distinct programs, the dojo's sensei, Kage Kawabata, understood Izuku's predicament after learning of the eccentric boy's ambition to become a hero. Putting a lot of emphasis on how difficult it would be for Izuku to become a hero if he didn't show up for every meeting on time, Kawabata-sensei, as he would be called from that point on, granted the Midoriyas a discount in exchange for Izuku promising to do so. Izuku agreed right away. While the latter was assigned to Wednesdays and alternated between Saturdays and Sundays, the former was taught on Mondays and Fridays. For Izuku, the setting worked wonders. He had a great time there, and the excitement of training with his different peers was a bonus given everything he was learning. So, one evening after a back-breaking Eskrima session, Izuku Midoriya was leaving the dojo to go home. He felt up to trying out his quirk despite his body being extremely exhausted. And so he raised his pack. He quickly put on the shaded glasses he had taken out from inside. Additionally, he pulled out one of his grandmother's canes that he had discovered hidden away in his mother's closet, stretched it out to its maximum length, and allowed his thoughts to drift into the distance. He suddenly sensed that there were millions of organisms within 2 blocks. The sensation was liberating and a welcome diversion from his day. He had discovered that his quirk allowed him to see and hear through insects. He had learned about that specific ability while he was drifting off to sleep in the middle of the night. Given what he witnessed that evening, it would be another experience he would not want to repeat. Therefore, one of Izuku's objectives was to become as proficient in seeing and hearing as possible. He could see and hear through the insects now, though he still needed to work on his hearing. But up until now, the ability only worked if he focused extremely hard. In fact, he needed to focus so much that he lost focus on the majority of outside stimuli that had nothing to do with his bugs. But it didn't really matter how his body saw his surroundings. He could just put a few bugs on his head to see where he was going, and that particular issue would stop bothering him. However, the frequent run-ins with random pedestrians were distracting and frequently caused him to lose focus. Fortunately, most of the people in his immediate vicinity ducked around a young boy carrying a cane and some shaded glasses. Would you want to put the blind child in danger of falling right now? Izuku came upon something strange a few minutes into his stroll. He came to a halt. One of the hornets he used to survey his surroundings had been killed by some kind of powder. He decided to watch the dilapidated building he sent the bugs into after sending a few more in. He discovered piles of cash and numerous firearms through the bugs' eyes. He saw a table of the white powder that had killed his hornet after more observation. The discovery caused his eyes to widen. It was obvious what he had discovered. It is a hideout for Yakuza. How likely is it that one of a dying organization's last safehouses will be located? Well, whatever. The location seems like a good opportunity for me to practice my fighting techniques. Izuku gave a headshake. What sort of ideas are those? That's the kind of thing that would kill me. Besides, it's against the law. The idea of storming into a Yakuza hideout and expecting to escape unscathed by bullets was something Izuku kept berating himself about. He kept moving forward. However, he couldn't get rid of the thought that it was wrong for him to leave. Even with the heroes rushing around, the Yakuza were criminals who caused damage and destruction in numerous locations. If he simply left what he saw alone, innocent people would suffer. Tonight, I'll give it some thought. There's no need to jump right in. They won't be absent tomorrow, after all. Izuku was discovered 2 blocks from the Yakuza hideout the following week. For the past 7 days, he spent hours considering his options and how he might destroy the hideout without being discovered. He found himself in a rather cozy ice cream shop as it was. According to what he had heard, the place had excellent ice cream in addition to serving as a place for him to focus. He had just finished eating his mint chocolate chip when his surveillance bees detected a disturbance in his hiding place. Gray, thin, drugs AR, ready for Anyo. Even though he was still working on using his bugs to pick up audio, what he had heard was sufficient. Some of the people inside merely wanted to be taken into custody. The second part of his plan was then put into action. Izuku discovered a payphone with his bugs in a quiet alleyway. The different insects started dialing a number. After the phone rang, a voice could be heard. "Hello, what's your emergency?" The difficult part followed. The next part of the plan, like his audio receptiveness, depended too much on something he was struggling to learn, but he ignored his concerns in order to take action. His bugs banded together and started making noise. Yakuza, hideout, found, was a harsh noise made by insects chirping. In order to distance the faceless mass of bugs from his own identity, Izuku made sure the voice was as light and feminine as possible while still conveying a sense of authority. Just last week, while he was deep in his Yakuza planning session, he came up with the idea. After a week of persistent efforts, he was able to form individual words he had practiced for hours on end, although he still struggled to get the syllables to sound good enough together to form words. I hope the discussion doesn't stray too far from my prediction. After all, there aren't many words I know that don't sound like a bunch of bugs. Izuku proceeded with his bug speech, providing the operator with the loadout of the roughly 20 Yakuza members inside the hideout as well as the address of the location he had discovered. Adding, drugs, money, the operator spoke her mind over the telephone. The voice masking appears to have been successful. Ma'am, I said, would you please stay where you are? The authorities are on their way. Oh, no, he would avoid getting sucked into the action. The bugs said, no, and then scattered into the storm drains and dumpsters nearby, leaving the phone dangling from its cord. Fortunately, all he had to say was what he had practiced. Izuku waited and placed an order for chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream. 5 minutes or so later, the bugs became aware that someone had arrived on the rooftop across from the hiding place. The aforementioned figure had 2 pointed headpieces protruding from his head, a scarf blowing in the wind, and a red and black costume. Is that Edgeshot, the upcoming hero? It was, as evidenced by the way his body slipped beneath the hideout's door and stretched like string. After about a minute, the hero emerged through the building's upper window and reshaped himself on the roof. Then, he squatted as though waiting while speaking into his headpiece. Before taking any action, he is awaiting backup. Astute. After a while, the entire police force gathered around the corner. Then Edgeshot appeared and started talking. With his bugs, Izuku listened. Info, Rai, round 27, Ray, trap. Don't thin, scout, no likes of, any. Then, they are preparing for a raid. Around the building, the courageous men and women prepared. Once more, Edgeshot crouched beneath the door, unlocked it, and let the police inside. Inside, the insects perched on the ceiling and watched in anticipation. After witnessing their fellow Yakuza members being subdued, the remaining few gave themselves up to the swarming police, while the vast majority were rendered unconscious by Edgeshot's 1,000-sheet pierce. Well, no holds barred. As the police started to apprehend the criminals, Izuku kept watching. Additionally, he finished his ice cream just in time. Izuku's face broke into a big smile. The enormous smile on his face caught the attention of the store's cashier. That must have been some good ice cream, seeing as you're smiling so much about it. No matter how absurd it was to believe the cashier knew what he was actually doing in the first place, Izuku snapped out of his reverie and started to panic at the possibility of being discovered. His bugs buzzed a little too much, but he quickly put them back in check. He came up with a quick answer. He stood up to go, saying, I guess you could say that. After all, it's best to leave the crime scene. Well, that's good then. The cashier went on. A few scoops of ice cream are a must to a happy and joyful life. I hope you have a great day. Izuku grinned slightly. After leaving the store, he said, yeah, a good day. I really am having one. Thanks for the ice cream. And left for his house. Gradually, his insects lost sight of the hiding place. Edgeshot started to leave for the station with the police. They would undoubtedly be looking into the odd voice they had heard on the phone. His early heroic deeds were concealed under the guise of vigilante action. However, that was irrelevant. Without any fatalities or injuries, the Yakuza members were completely routed and captured. The Yakuza, whose numbers were already dwindling, were now down to 27 members. He wasn't the worthless Deku that Kachan, who always called him Bakugo, was because of his peculiarity. He reflected on the police. Naturally, if he intended to keep using this newfound ability to track down criminals, he would exercise caution. Give me a debrief. Of course, the officer said. 2 days ago, on the intersection of Sonkyo and Kaigancho, we received a call regarding a supposed Yakuza hideout. Edgeshot arrived on the scene 5 minutes later. He checked the payphone where the call was made, and found the phone hanging from its cord. The phone was checked for prints later on, none were found. And then, continued the cop, Edgeshot scouted out the building. He found everything as the voice had said it would be. He later raided the building with our officers, the operation going off without a hitch. 27 individuals were arrested, 11 being repeat arrests for prior charges. 9 of them were wanted for escapes and similar crimes. And the anonymous caller, what do we know of them at this point? Not much. Aside from their apparent attempt to distort their voice, there isn't much we know. We believe that the caller was female, but then again, that could just be because of the methods used to hide their voice. Heck, for all we know it could be their quirk, or that's just their natural sounding voice. I see. Well, I'll keep this incident in mind. For now, I'll be looking around for similar events on my patrols. I'll keep you up to date, officer. Thank you, Eraserhead. I know you're still fairly new to this and all, but I believe you're best suited to solving our problem. You have my thanks. Eraserhead gave a nod. They said goodbye to one another, saying, of course. No worries, officer. We need to see what else this anonymous caller may know, after all. The Erasure hero left the station and ventured into the darkness. A swipe was made at his legs, which were barely avoided in place of their quickness, saying, you move too slowly, Midoriya. I try, Sensei. A blow to the older man's arms was deflected with ease by what appeared to be 2 strategically placed sticks. The master entered through his student's left side and then his right, causing an unending barrage of fights from which the younger boy could hardly break free. Indeed you try, but is it enough? He asked. One swipe went through, at the legs once more. Izuku dropped to the ground. With a gasp, the weary boy took a deep breath. In contrast, his sparring partner appeared calm and there was no sign of weariness in his body. Good job, Midoriya, Kawabata informed him. That was 10 seconds longer than your record. 500 more and I think you'll be ready to face down a common thug. Izuku laughed. Very funny, Sensei. Thank you, Izuku. Nice to know that this elderly man can still entertain his students even after all these years. The others had fallen for the sensei's alleged cancellation of the day's session, so the 2 were the only ones at the dojo at the moment. Izuku was not fooled by the trick for a moment. Now that their session was over, Izuku stood up and started to tidy up. Nevertheless, he had been considering something for a few days. If anything, this was the ideal moment to bring it up, since he and his sensei were the only ones present. Sensei, Izuku said, pausing. Yes, Kawabata inquired. Well, you see, never mind. Tisk tisk tisk. That won't do. What was lesson number 3 again, Izuku? Hesitation won't do you any good in combat, Kawabata-sensei. Precisely. Now, let's just picture your thoughts as a battlefield, something of which wouldn't say is too far from the truth, given from your mannerisms. Izuku shied away and smiled, not really refuting the claims. What is it you want to tell me? After a few moments of silence, Izuku asked himself, do I really want to tell him? He would likely know the answer, whether something was wrong, or whether it was just him, but to say it aloud. Well. Eventually, he opened up, saying, it's just that I've been here for a while, Sensei, and I feel like I've kind of stagnated. Even though I practice every day, I feel like it's insufficient. Am I going to be prepared? Will I be accepted? Can a hero still be me? Despite the absence of Mei. Izuku was interrupted by the click-clack of 2 wooden sticks. Kawabata gave a headshake. You and your muttering. The instructor's posture changed from that of a master martial artist to that of an ordinary old man as he gazed at his pupil. His crossed arms were all that was noticeable. After a while, he spoke. In all seriousness, Midoriya, the year and a half that you've spent here has done wonders to your body. What was once a feeble, flimsy stick is now an elegant, sturdy Bakken. In fact, a few more months and you just may be able to match up to my nephew. And he's been training since he was 4. Your drive and spirit truly inspire me, Midoriya, and don't you forget it. Izuku swallowed hesitantly, almost doubtfully. Thank you, Kawabata-sensei. The elderly man gave a nod. And thank you. You've made me realize something, Midoriya. I've ignored how your life goes on outside these walls for a while now, focusing on your drive and will in our sessions. I've blinded myself to one side of your problem. And if I'm not mistaken, you have very little of a personal life outside of training at this point, if any at all. If anything, you need to calm down and relax. You are still a kid, after all. Izuku raised one eyebrow in inquiry. Meaning? Don't attend any sessions for a week. This time, both eyebrows raised. But Sensei, Nope, interrupted the older man. Think this is a part of your training. Break it, and the deal is off. Got it. Midoriya shook his head angrily. Good, you need to learn that training isn't all there is to life. Even with your circumstances, so go out, have fun. Be with your friends, or something. I don't care really, just don't stress yourself out over physical training. Yes, Sensei. His sensei had prohibited him from training 2 days prior. 2 days without the tiresome effort he had become accustomed to. It nearly seemed like he was squandering time that he could have used to better himself and get ready to be a hero. At least he had his quirk. His sensei hadn't forbidden him from using that, so he could still train with it. For lying to his sensei about his purported quirklessness, he still felt guilty. Because his sensei trusted his desire to become a hero without a quirk, he had gained access to the dojo. And he was using that quirk to carry out vigilante actions behind his sensei's back. However, Izuku reminded himself, it was a necessary action. Society did not accept bugs. His peculiarity would bring too many reminders of such horrors, such as cockroach infestations in a home or mounds of maggots in food. He wouldn't be accepted. Furthermore, given the current situation, I could simply manage 2 personas. I identify as both a vigilante and a hero. Izuku combed his hair out of his face. It was significantly longer than it had been previously, a decision he made because it benefited his quirk. Wearing the cane and shades to mimic the blind, he was once more strolling through the city. This time, however, he was not looking for any crimes. He was looking for something completely different, specifically golden orb weavers. When he checked his apartment, he had only discovered 2 of the spiders. Given what he intended to do with them, they wouldn't be sufficient. He moved ahead on the sidewalk, squeezing past the people as they went by. A hornet hive, some maggots, some flies, were there. There's a golden orb approaching rig. Izuku started to topple over. He had stumbled over something, but it felt somewhat fleshy. Then a person. He felt for his face. Apparently the shaded glasses were all right. A few insects reacted to his momentary discomfort. He shoved them away. I'm so sorry. That was my completely fault. Just crouching on the sidewalk like that. Here, let me get you up. A hand appeared. Izuku accepted it and pulled himself to his feet. It appeared to be a speech bubble to which the hand was attached. What? The boy's head grew and shrank in size, the round white bubble doing little to conceal his distress. So sorry. Look at me, causing a hazard for the blind. Are you okay? Nothing broken anywhere, he said. Whoa, that must be his peculiarity. A basic bubble head, though. Most likely not. Then it must be useful for something else. Maybe a text display. That would be very beneficial for education and other fields. I'm curious about the item's durability. Is it more resilient than the average head? Is it less powerful? It might even act a... The boy with the bubble head said, ahem. Oh, I see, he was mumbling. Once more, and I continued to do so. Maybe I ought to. Sorry, said Izuku. I just get sort of excited whenever I see a new quirk. Yours just turns out to match all the criteria of uniqueness. Sorry about that. The boy gave a sound that suggested he was grinning. No worries, I don't mind. But, if anything, we should be focusing on you. Me? Izuku inquired. Yeah, you fell over, and it's all my fault. There wasn't any way you could have seen me, and I was just crouching there in the middle of the sidewalk. A complete hazard for someone blind. What? Blind? What is he saying that? Oh, Izuku rubbed the back of his head and laughed nervously. I'm not blind, actually. Oh, the nameless boy said, cocking his head. He waved the glasses and said, then what's with the hole, the cane, too? It's because of my quirk, actually. Oh, he said bewilderedly. What kind of quirk would make you need to look like a blind person? Seems like a weird sort of necessity, I mean. No offense. Izuku's feet swayed in place. Well, what am I? Manage bugs. Yes, If I wanted to, I could order each insect separately. I am also able to see through them. I could then make the insects crawl into your orifices while you sleep, or make sure the botflies have the ideal location too. I'd rather not say. A pregnant pause. Oh. The boy held out his arm and said, well, that's fine then. In that case, my name is Manga Fukidashi, and my quirk is comic. I'm sorry for making you fall over. Izuku turned to face the extended hand and said, no. It's fine. He moved slowly to pick it up. He gave a handshake. It's my fault anyway, Fukidashi-san. I wasn't paying attention. I'm, Midoriya, by the way. Izuku Midoriya. Fukidashi made a X with his arms crossed. Nope, none of that, Midoriya. What, did I make a mistake? Already, none of that, Fukidashi-san, stuff. We're friends now, and I'll only accept the usage of my first name from now on. Izuku blinked. Friends. Is he, actually? Well, breathing deeply. In that case, Manga, the boy said, giving another thumbs up, it's nice to meet you. And, I'm sorry for running into you. It's no problem, man. Just a common mistake. I know how quirks can be. Izuku said, but that doesn't excuse, and shook his head. Alright, brought up Manga. How about this? I'm kinda new to the neighborhood, just moved in actually. You can show me around the city. Show me all the cool places you know of. What did you say? Shish. Give him a tour. Like, spending time together. He added that we were pals. No one wanted to simply spend time with him. Not after he discovered he had no peculiarities. Maybe. He put his blind man's costume in his pack and said, yes, Manga. Come over this way, I know this really cool ice cream parlor over yonder. I guess the spiders could wait. Manga sunk his teeth into a brownie fudge sundae and asked, how did you discover such a good ice cream place, Izuku? At the moment, the two were in the ice cream shop that Izuku had used for his initial stakeout. Given the detours they had ultimately taken to a number of shopping malls and parks, it had taken them several hours to get there. However, they eventually arrived at their initial destination, and by then, they were both quite exhausted. To get some ice cream, they decided. Izuku, meanwhile, was observing with interest. He wanted to know if it would be wise to take Manga out to eat. After all, he could see that Manga had no mouth. Either that or the boy on the other side of him had a way to eat or didn't need to. However, it was kind of interesting to see him now. You're doing it again, Izuku. The green-headed boy exclaimed, startled out of his reverie. Sorry again, Manga. The thin bass swirled it from left to right as the head shook in reaction. Like I said a while ago, no worries. If anything, the muttering is really you. Fits you very well, I think. Once more, there we are. First, my muttering didn't seem to bother him in any way. Back at school, the other kids always thought he was strange for it. However, Manga is here, Thank you. That means a lot to me, Fukidashi-san. He saw a huge red X in his head this time. Manga, remember. Izuku grinned and said, of course. Thank you, Manga. By the time they arrived at Manga's house, it was already late in the evening, and the sun was just starting to set. Izuku didn't initially notice the time until he was standing in front of the door. In the end, he used the Fukidashi's phone to call his mother, assuaging her concerns when he claimed to be at a friend's house. Izuku was lucky that Manga's family wasn't home at the time because, after all, he wasn't entirely sure how he felt about meeting new people. The manga was sufficient for the day. Manga insisted that he could stay over, but he left anyway. Since he still had a few passengers on board, he declined to leave them lying about where they could be found while he slept. Izuku was thus left in the dark when the Fukidashi residence's door closed. Izuku had never been out so late and by himself before, so it was a first. It really was a novel experience. The atmosphere at night actually piqued his interest, all things considered. I could explore for a while, I guess. Additionally, go get those spiders from earlier. I've got time. He began, albeit very slowly, in the general direction of home. To keep an eye out for any threats, his insects scouted ahead. After a while, he came to the corner where he had assembled the 3 golden orb weavers. From a windowsill on the 2nd floor, the spiders swooped down on him. When they got to him, they landed on his hair, the long locks concealing them well enough to be invisible. They joined the 20 or so others who had spent the entire day concealed in his bush of a haircut. Since acquiring his quirk, Izuku had become more accustomed to being around insects. He thought this was a necessary consequence of the closeness he would develop with the insects that shared his mental space. They were the only insects in his hair for months. They were also a source of comfort and, if necessary, a form of protection. Having met Manga, however, at least gave him a friend with whom he could converse. And thanks to Sensei as well. Now that I understand what he meant, I can see why he didn't want me to constantly practice martial arts. After securing the spiders, he strolled home. Or if his insects hadn't sniffed gunpowder from about half a block away, he would have. His insects were drawn to the spot. He stopped dead in his tracks at what he saw. A mugging. According to the insects, muscular physique, a man was holding a woman against an alleyway wall. Where had the heroes gone? Was no one around? The moonlight glinted on a gun. A firearm. Shoot, I have to hurry over there. He started to move forward but stopped. Am I interfering with the actual crime? Vigilantism was that. He gave a headshake. However, he had already accomplished that, just not with his actual body. Was he serious? The gun was cocked. He started to run in the direction of the crime. He then swiftly opened his pack to reveal the empty space. The bag he pushed over his head must continue to be unidentified. After all, I can still see with my bugs. He witnessed the scene firsthand. Both figures turned to look at him. Oh no, already spotted. I should have given this some more thought. Oi, what the hell are you doing here, punk? Can't you see I'm a little busy? Said the man. Izuku made sure he and all of his bugs continued to watch the man. Was he really expecting me to disappear as if nothing had happened? The man shouted, "Hey, what did I just say? Why you still here?" In his grasp, the woman trembled. It seems so. He reached for his eskrima sticks, which were at his waist. However, they weren't present. Oh no, I forgot. My belongings are not with me. Canceling out. Ah, hell, how's your quirk canceling mine out? Then the gun was aimed at him. What does he mean? Izuku stopped. On his hand, a single hornet landed. Look here, punk. I've been stalking these streets for years, and not once have I been caught. He said. He glanced at his hand and said, and I'm not gonna let some. What the? Holy. The man thrashed his hand, knocking the hornet away. Additionally, the gun was flung to the ground. Izuku wasted little time. He rushed up to the man and put a fly on each limb. Izuku's Muay Thai was met with a crude defense from the thug, who hardly deflected the blows thrown at him. However, Izuku was able to anticipate the man's movements and stop the approaching attacks thanks to the bugs. The criminal's feet are then swept by Izuku. The man fell. At that moment, Izuku gave the fallen man his whole attention. He went after his rival, intending to. Again, what was I doing? Something struck him in the side. He stumbled. What took place? He had just stumbled and was sprawled on the ground in front of the man. Strange, the man thought. My quirk was effective at the time. Why didn't it do so some time ago? The man halted in front of Izuku. Well, whatever. I'm not going to be stopped now by a single man. I've been robbing the defenseless one by one on these streets for years. They're easy targets, the man said, drawing a knife. There's no way I'll be able to get up in time to move or do anything to bugs. I am able to. Now, why don't you just lay there while I go? A heavy bag struck the man's head, causing him to topple over. It was the woman from earlier. She continued to strike the man over the head. Izuku blinked. After a while, the woman turned to him and assisted him in standing. The voice said, thank you for that, Izuku. You kidding? The woman inquired. She pointed to her ears, which were probably enlarged because of her peculiarity. If anything, I should be thanking you. He caught me off guard and then blammo. He had me against the wall. I don't know how I didn't hear him coming, though. I should have been, she said. Anyways, thanks, who are you anyways? Baghead man or something? Oh, I see. Right now, I'm still a vigilante. Gotta go. Crime to fight and stuff. Izuku sprinted away from the scene once more, avoiding contact as much as possible. It was quite close. That man nearly. Izuku went into another alley to hide. He dispersed all his bugs around to ensure he wasn't being followed. Fortunately, he wasn't. He took the sack off his head. Someone was just saved by me. I am aware that I really shouldn't have, and that perhaps I should have simply called the police. Even though I nearly died, that was actually kind of thrilling. Izuku slapped his cheeks and shook his head. Gather yourself. After all, you still have to get home. Izuku pulled himself to his feet. He gave a headshake. After all, I need more practice. Izuku continued walking until he arrived at his bed. After a few more days, Izuku was in the dojo training alongside his peers and sensei. The voice said, "Thank you, Kawabata-sensei, Izuku. I now see why you requested that I abstain from martial arts for a week." Kawabata-sensei grinned and said, "What did I say? After all, people your age require more than labor." The man stood up. "Izuku, did you discover anything about yourself?" "A lot, sir. I didn't truly understand a lot of things until the last week." "All right, prepare now. You're not standing straight. A 2-bit thug could easily take you down." With a smile, Izuku said, "Of course, sensei." "All right, everybody, calm down, calm down," the teacher said. After using his peculiarity to gauge the situation, the stern man slowly lowered himself in his own chair in weight. The class finally complied with the order. A full minute had gone by, exactly as expected, and gradually started to disengage from their chatter and take their seats. "Even though the day is coming to an end, I would like to welcome everyone back for the new school year," the teacher said, nodding. "You are all aware that this is your final year of elementary school. Actually, starting to get ready for the move from elementary to middle school is a significant moment in your life. The shift will be more like..." Having already considered the current topic, Izuku ignored his teacher and instead thought about the past few months since he had met Manga. These months were unlike anything he had experienced in a long time, experiences that had been rare ever since he had realized he was quirkless. Since Bakugo had decided to torment him all those years ago, he had never truly understood what friendship was, but with Manga, well, it was still kind of strange. The feelings of having a friend, that is. Naturally, he and Manga couldn't spend every day together, but the few days he did spend with Manga were sufficient. On the days he wasn't with him, Izuku spent time exploring the city, gathering bugs, and keeping an eye out for any ongoing illegal activity. Instead, he had resorted to reporting crimes using his insect decoy, whose voice had become more distinct over the months, learned the basic phrases he had practiced for reporting crimes, and was now branching out to other words, coming around to being able to hold entire conversations with his bugs if he so desired. He had avoided direct physical intervention unless it was absolutely necessary, not wanting to have a repeat of the guy with the knife. Izuku was startled out of his reverie by a loud blast. "Yes, indeed. Slow down, Bakugo," the instructor strained. As usual, it appears that Bakugo is the only one acting out. "Deku, what did you say?" His hands were glimmering once more. "Whoops, did you say that aloud?" "Yes, it was. Now, what?" "Bakugo," the instructor said, reaching out. Bakugo's eye twitched, but he gave in and sank into his seat, huffing but doing nothing else for the moment, as if he didn't want to go on. Izuku made sure that one remained unsaid and hidden in his mind that time, so it appears that he knows better than to start anything now, at least not in front of the teacher. "As I was saying, you all..." The bell rang out again, and the teacher sighed, letting the situation unfold. "All right, class, that seems to be the end of the day. Tomorrow, we'll continue this discussion." As if he were a relieved survivor who had at last discovered an oasis in a desert, he gathered his belongings and left the room more quickly than any of the other students. Like a flock of geese to a pond, the class that followed suit made their way to the door, but Izuku remained behind, having long since learned that it was best to wait for everyone to leave. He kept staring out the window, imagining new uses for his insects. Izuku looked away from the window as the noise of student drama and gossip finally subsided. Bakugo had stayed behind, but he was conspicuously alone, his sides empty of his usual friends. Unfortunately, fate didn't seem to want to be kind to him today. At least he's not accompanied by his two friends. "Hello, Deku, what did you say some time ago?" Before the encounter with that knife guy all those months ago, Izuku was frightened by the violent oranges and reds that sprang from his palms as his hands crackled with energy. Izuku gulped, though, because Bakugo himself was still dangerous even though he wasn't afraid of the mini explosions. "It was nothing, Kachan. For the time being, it's better to remain anonymous and behave normally." Bakugo's face furrowed in rage. "You say nothing." He stalked up to Izuku, grabbing him by the collar of his shirt and holding him against the wall. Explosions racketed the other hand, dangerously inching towards Izuku's face. You sure? Izuku took a deep breath and said, but then he thought about something. He looked closely at the boy in front of him and thought, Bakugo, he's really nothing like that knife guy, is he? He's just a bully. All he does is beat me up, every day at school. But why? Self-satisfaction, popularity. No, that doesn't make sense. No one is here now to watch him beat up the quirkless Deku. Hey, why don't you respond to me instead of continuing your eerie muttering? An unidentified force deep within his mind acted in his stead, causing a split-second decision and a crack in the facade. How about you quit being such a self-satisfied glory hog? Izuku shot back. Bakugo's eyes went wide with shock. Izuku blinked, the connection fading from memory. Where had that come from? An explosion blasted in Izuku's face, leaving behind a harsh reddening of skin, and a couple of the bugs in his hair died from the heat. Bakugo's eye twitched, saying, "Wrong answer." Buzzing. Anger flared. The presence reappeared. Izuku acted without thinking. Bakugo was thrown back in surprise by a fist that came up to his face. Izuku collapsed to the ground, no longer held by Bakugo's hand. The influence vanished once more, leaving no trace of its intervention. Izuku glanced at his hand, wondering if he had actually just done that. Deku. Izuku turned to face the roar and saw Bakugo, who had blood streaming from his nose and hands that were crackling with energy, almost as if he were about to kill someone. Buzzing. Oh, Ka-chan. I apologize. I don't. Stop talking. You, what the devil? He had his eyes on the window. Izuku turned too, discovering that the window's exterior was covered in insects. Then I have to concentrate on not doing that, tell them to disperse, make sure they don't revere. What the hell are all those insects doing? Are they reacting to my distress? Izuku winced as the class door opened, but managed to get the insects to move away. Why is there so much noise? The heads of Izuku and Bakugo turned to face the comment. The principal, a rather large man with a commanding presence and attention to detail, stood in the doorway and gazed at the scene. What the, have the two of you been fighting? Now to my office. Both of the enemies obeyed. Izuku was sitting outside the principal's office, where Bakugo had gone first, complaining and glaring at Izuku with daggers the entire way. There was something niggling at the back of his mind, but I didn't even consider it before I punched him. I punched Ka-chan. Why did I do that? However, is this how Ka-chan feels every time he beats me down? It felt good to finally defend myself and act back. The office door slammed open, and Bakugo left, still glaring at Izuku, but as if he knew that conflict wouldn't help right now, he walked away. There was a momentary silence, followed by a flurry of papers and a voice. Midoriya, my office, if you will, the principal repeated and said. Izuku obeyed and went into the man's office, which was rather dark with dark leather seats and wooden furniture, and he was seated in one of those seats with a placard that read, Renjiro Isoshi, facing him from the desktop. The man in question was rather robust, so to speak, his large figure filling his chair, his mustache concealing his mouth from view, and his rather attention-grabbing voice that begged for attention. He started talking. He glanced at Izuku, as though assessing his response, and said, "It's come to my attention that you involved yourself in a scuffle with young Bakugo. This caused him to participate in the incident. I must ask, what were you thinking, Midoriya? Getting into that argument with him? Because of what you did, he might have suffered severe injuries." What? Buzzing. But I was only defending myself, sir, Mr. Renjiro. Oh, one of his bushy eyebrows rose in question. Do tell. It was Ka-chan who initiated it, Izuku added. Izuku pointed to the red marks on his face and said, I just punched in response, after he blasted me with his quirk. The teacher asked, Midoriya, while I am tolerant of most things, the one thing I don't appreciate is lying. Bewildered, Izuku blinked. Lying. In agitation, the hidden insects on his head started to scurry up and down his hair. Yes, I've already heard what happened from young Bakugo. And given the current situation, it is clear that you started the altercation. Buzzing. As before, the bugs gathered at the window, but fortunately they were hidden by the closed blinds. But that's not Midoriya. This time, I'm inclined to just issue a warning. He started tinkering with his computer, as though the matter was settled and there was nothing more to discuss. You are usually very well behaved, and I'm willing to label this as a one-time event. However, This is not the first time it has occurred. Izuku shouted. Oh, the principal turned away from his screen to face Izuku. Are you implying that you have previously initiated altercations with Bakugo? What? No, but I haven't even told you my version of events. Bakugo and you were in here for almost 10 minutes. You're not even attempting to understand how things began from my perspective. Midoriya. The harsh tone of the principal's voice reverberated throughout the room as a hand slammed down on the table. He took a deep breath and said, "Calm, calm. Be calm. Disperse, disperse." The bugs outside obeyed, and the ones in his hair relaxed as Izuku leapt, his tirade spluttering into nothing. The principal gave him a look that suggested he was waiting for a response. Okay, Mr. Renjiro. Good, he said, nodding. You're fired. Calm, calm. Izuku got up from the chair and left. In search of Bakugo, he looked out into the hallway and started to move stealthily, hiding behind walls and then around corners, but he slapped himself in the face by the third corner. Of course, I can use my insects. Izuku hid in the bathroom while a couple of flies scouted ahead, scuttling through the empty school's hallways. He looked at himself in the mirror, and although the reddened skin started to fade a little, the wounds were still visible. Why? The buzzing kept getting louder. Izuku gave in, and the static became clear, the sight and feel of hundreds of thousands all at once, and a few bugs started to creep in through the open window and the vents, scouting the walls and floors, and coming in from the sink drains and even from the trash cans themselves. Izuku calmed down, because he had discovered long ago that whenever he connected to his swarm, he felt more at ease, and whether he was angry or sad, the feelings simply vanished. He wasn't sure why, but he wasn't going to waste a good thing. When the flies returned after 5 minutes, there was no sign of Bakugo, so Izuku caused them to scatter once more. It appears that he went home. I take another deep breath. I need to take a short walk to clear my head. As Izuku left the school, he started to reflect on what the principal had said, but instead of going home, he went in the opposite direction. There must be a reason why he took Kachan at face value but not me. But why? What specifically makes me less credible in this situation? The blood streaming from Kachan's nose while I only had minor burns. Some kind of fabricated logic that simply discredits me. Is it because it's my word against Kachan's? He's accomplished more for himself at the school than I have, and while I stand on the sidelines, he's established a reputation for himself by doing this and that. Why does he always get away with it while you get home bleeding and hurt? Indeed, why is that? Why does Bakugo always get away with his crimes? He harms people while claiming to be a hero, and everyone just looks on. How could he? Breathe deep, in, and out, in. He reconnected with his swarm, calmed down instantly, and walked noticeably more slowly as Izuku concentrated on his insects. Izuku tried to distract himself from his rage by amusing himself with the daily activities of bugs. I need to focus on what happened for the time being, look into it later, and figure it out. He saw the bugs fly free in the open air, scuttle beneath floorboards, forage in the trash for food, and eat. A group of maggots had all perished in a raging assault of heat and shrapnel, and Izuku winced. A blast. Izuku was forced to make a right turn and follow the road to a rather small scrapyard that was overflowing with abandoned appliances and refrigerators. Why not? He entered. Not much was visible to the few insects he sent in. He didn't want more to blow up, necessarily, but there were a couple of rats, a couple of what appeared to be makeshift robots, a figure with pink hair just to his left, and even a Koople. Hold on. Wah. Bugs swarmed his position as he felt a hand pull him to the side, panicking, and reaching for his Eskrima sticks, intending to aim for the. He saw a young girl's face, about his age, with pink dreadlocks all over her head and yellow eyes that seemed to be looking into his soul. Her face was inches from his, so close that he could feel her breath. It's a girl. So close. Why is she so close? He stumbled. Hi, why are you here? Izuku froze in disbelief. Her face drew closer, and she gave Izuku's head a few bonks, her goggles bouncing off her own head. Hey, is anyone home? Wait, crosshairs. Her eyes seemed to enlarge slightly. I have never done anything like this before, so why are her eyes cross-haired? Is it her quirk, some kind of aiming quirk like snipe? Ah, but that doesn't matter. She's still so close. A girl. What does she want? Am I intruding? Is this her scrapyard? Her parents? But what is the cause of the bugs in your hair? At that, Izuku yelled. What? He inquired. Bugs. In your hair. The girl cried out. What has she done? You even have a house centipede and a spider. Is that the cause of your long hair? To keep the world from seeing all those creepy crawlies? I don't understand what you're talking about. She blanched and continued to stare, getting closer and closer until she said, "You're weird." Izuku exhaled in relief, saying, but don't worry about that. I have children to raise. Izuku blinked and asked, "What?" He watched the odd girl pick up a wrench and begin working on something. The nature of the thing was unclear to him. It was rectangular, metallic, and if the vibrations detected by the insects nearby were accurate, it appeared to have moving parts inside. Maybe she's the cause of the few malfunctioning robots among all this garbage. "Oh, hey," the girl said. Izuku leapt. The girl pushed back against him, saying, "I know. Why don't you help me?" Again. Help you do what? Why? Help me make my babies, of course. What sort of a statement is that? I'm just shouting that into the air. Is she even familiar with the meaning of that phrase? Almost as if. She approached a hatch on the metal shape and said, "Here, it's simple. I put my head in here, and when I ask for a screwdriver, you hand it to me. A buzzsaw, same thing. The chainsaw, well, it's under a few boards and a couple of things, and you may need to get creative with the cord reach, but otherwise, the same thing. Oh, thank you to everything that is powerful and right. She is merely discussing her creations, machines, not real infants. All she wants is for me to assist her in giving her tools. Wait, chainsaw." With a screwdriver in hand, she ducked back into the hatch. The air echoed with clanks and clinks as they struck the walls of the. She uttered, her voice resonating through the metal interiors, "What brings you around?" Izuku paused to gather his thoughts and weave a tale that would neither expose his peculiarity nor paint him in a stalker's light. "I guess I was just a little curious. I heard an explosion as soon as I saw the location. Wanted to look into it and see if there was a problem." He did not flinch at all. "I just spoke to a girl." Izuku let out a mental sigh of relief. "Well, it appears that destiny has connected us. You know, I just needed an assistant. You can actually begin by coming." Hatsume jumped out of the device, sprang quickly toward him, and threw him to the ground. A few seconds later, the metal object exploded, and a swarm of flies vanished into thin air as the steam and fire flared. The machine sputtered and clunked, but otherwise appeared to be well held together. "Oh, that answers that mystery. Aha, it's functioning flawlessly. We'll be finished in an hour with just a few more touches." "What did you say? Are you in?" He was still on the ground with a weird weight scattered across his body when the voice came from directly above him. He looked up and realized, oh no. Her body was pressing against his as she lay on top of him, refusing to get off. Oh, on top of that, too much physical contact. But her head cocked to the side, her face ever so slightly closer to his, as if unfazed by their position, she said, "You know, I never did get your name." "It's Izuku. Midoriya Izuku." "Well then, Izuku. First name basis. Once more, Mei Hatsume is the name. I'm glad to have met you." After some gentle prodding, Izuku found that the explosion thingy was actually, well, an explosion thingy. Hatsume stated that she was experimenting with explosions, trying to see how well they could be used to insta-microwave food, but the results weren't very encouraging. It turned out that, within the hour, actually meant 2 hours, along with an additional time slot for a super magnet in the works. Thus, in the midst of a metal-infested scrapyard, the two were working on a handheld super magnet, with Izuku desperately trying to make sure that neither he nor Hatsume were killed by any approaching projectiles. "I'm still amazed that none of those things have approached her. I've been avoiding them the entire time, and as soon as she began tinkering with the thing's magnetic field, she stopped listening to me." "And finished," Hatsume declared, and Izuku jumped once more at the sound, narrowly avoiding yet another metal rod, the third one in 5 minutes, to be precise. "Take a look, Izu-kun. My child is finished. It has an almost infinite radius, a variable magnetic pull, and an integrated on-off switch. Well, at least to this whole lot. However, that is irrelevant. What matters is that it's finished. Thank you very much." Izuku, somewhat taken aback by Hatsume's tirade, looked up at the sky and saw that it was reddish. "It's already evening. Whoa. Good evening. Oh no, Mom must be worried once more. I apologize, Hatsume. I must leave. My mother will be concerned." He started to run away, but paused to glance behind him. You'll still be here tomorrow, right? Hatsume gave him a look and said, but naturally. After all, I still have a lot of babies to make. His head tipped back, and her eyes seemed to be darting in his direction. She has been zooming into my soul for the past few hours, so perhaps it is a kind of binocular vision quirk. Is my assistant going to be here tomorrow? He thought about Manga, who had stated that he wouldn't be available for the majority of the week. Perfect. Izuku blinked out his thoughts and then smiled, something he had been doing more and more since he'd met Manga. You're sure of it? I'll see you tomorrow. Thinking about the girl, he ran home. Hatsume might have been a bit too stubborn about her inventions and lacked personal space, but she was a nice person who treated him well, just like Manga did. This was something he had been longing for. He glanced at the sunset once more. When you're having fun, time really does fly by. Asking his green-headed friend, so, Izuku, where might we be going today? Manga asked. The boy was clearly nervous, as evidenced by the tense pace at which he was moving. He turned to face his conceited friend and responded with a tirade he had been mentally preparing for this very moment. Izuku acknowledged, well, I sort of came into a slight problem. You see, I met this girl a couple of months ago. She's really nice, and a really good friend. And, well, oh, the boy's bubble sprouted 2 circles, one of which had a bent line above it. Makeshift eyes, followed by an arched eyebrow of curiosity. Izuku pointed out. Manga said, don't tell me. You like this girl, don't you? Izuku answered right away, but of course, she's been so nice to me and everything. It's refreshing, you know, having someone like her around. She doesn't even care about my muttering or anything like that. She's a very good friend. Manga let out a sigh. Ah, so innocent. Wah, what do you mean? The bubble of Manga shook. Never mind. Anyway, the girl. Oh, well, you see, I agreed to help her with something the other day. One of her projects. The problem is that, well, I was sort of caught up in the moment. I forget that you wanted to hang out today and well, now the two things come into conflict. I was wondering if the 3 of us could just spend the day together. It was the best I could come up with. If you don't have a problem with it, that is. Manga chuckled. A few seconds later, he started speaking. Sorry, I'm not laughing at your idea. It's just, this is so you know. Worrying about something so unsubstantial. You don't have to worry about things like this, Izuku. Of course I'm fine with it. Besides, miss out on a chance of a new friend. Fat chance. Izuku exhaled a sigh of comfort. Thank you, Manga. You don't know how much this means to me. Manga gave a nod. As long as she isn't like that Bakugo guy that I met. That guy, honestly. No. Hatsume's nothing like Bakugo. I know. You said that she's nice after all. I'm willing to believe your impressions of people. The two friends continued talking about the month's latest hero debuts. Manga was unaware that Izuku had insects scouting their area. Izuku had been walking this route for the past day and was looking for any new hideouts or crimes that were being committed. Fortunately, it appeared that the city's criminals had not yet committed such a crime. Izuku, however, longed for battle and kept his bugs alert. They arrived at the scrapyard in no time. This place is quite large. You claim that your friend has the entire space to herself. Well, her parents actually own the lot, Izuku said, nodding. In there, Hatsume is free to do as she pleases. Izuku tilted his head, or perhaps her love for her invention was influenced by the lot. Her quest for invention just so happens to fit right as well in the yard. I'm not totally certain. Izuku called out to Hatsume as the two entered the scrapyard. Hatsume, I'm present. Stop tinkering with your stuff, please. Until I get there, anyway. The contents of your boots are volatile enough to duck, as we both know. Izuku leapt aside, behind a dishwasher that was broken. Fortunately, the debris simply bounced off his head without causing any damage, but Manga was too preoccupied with surveying his surroundings to react quickly enough to the warning of a metal casing rushing onto his figure. Manga spun around and exclaimed, "What was that?" "Sorry, Manga, that was probably one of the propulsors we were working on yesterday." Izuku emerged from his cover and turned to face the direction from which the projectile had come, shouting into space, "Hatsume! I advised you to handle your belongings more carefully. That could have caused harm to someone." Attracted by the sound of her assistant's approach, the inventor emerged from behind a stack of scrap. Izuku, you arrived. You also brought assistance. Aid. Manga's sweat dropped. But naturally, you've committed to the task of producing my offspring by entering my territory, she said, advancing a step with her fist forming in the air. Infants. With dozens of exclamation points popping up all over his face, Manga asked. Oh, but don't worry about that. Izuku and Manga trailed behind Hatsume as she walked back to the pair of boots she was working on. So, Mr. Bubblehead, Hatsume went on. Actually, Manga, Fukidashi Manga. All right, Manga said. You have a really nice head, I must say. Oh, I'm grateful. It's a little out of the ordinary, but after all this time, I've gotten used to it. In addition, I believe it perfectly complements my peculiarity. What is that, too? Hatsume asked as she started to fasten his boots' soles. Well, Hatsume broke off, saying, Izuku, put our current task on hold. The propulsions are excessively large. When that one from a while back just blasted off, I noticed it. Too erratic. Instead, we must think of turbines. Izuku took out a notebook, one that was especially meant for Hatsume's invention concepts, and started listing potential uses for turbine-powered boots. Anyway, Hatsume uttered, go on. All right, okay, so what was your name once more? Hatsume Mei. Additionally, remember it. All right, since you inquired, Mei, my peculiarity is humorous. I can use my voice to physically create sounds. But the more I use my quirk, the more sore my throat gets. He announced, boing, which created a platform on which he bounced a rock. Interesting. You mentioned that after a while, your throat becomes sore. Manga gave a nod. Although I'm not an expert in biology, I might be able to come up with a way to offset that. Perhaps some sort of throat humidifier. This could be challenging. Hatsume pulled out one of her notebooks and began jotting down potential ideas as they occurred to her. Manga was taken aback by the girl's readiness to outweigh the negative aspects of his quirk. Oh, there's no need to. Oh, yelled out Hatsume. Both Manga and Izuku jumped at this, the latter dropping the notebook he was writing in. Izuku, you have yet to share your peculiarity with me. Tell me, please. Imagine all the amazing offspring we could create together to make it work. Izuku froze in the middle of bending down to retrieve his dropped notebook. Oh no. Well, Izuku, you make a valid point. I recall you saying you didn't want to talk about it when we first met, Manga continued. The bugs, the insects, the legs, the skittering, what would they think? Oh no, 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 they want to know about my quirk. About the bugs. Izuku, they would flee, terrified, and they would no longer want to be furry. Izuku inhaled deeply. I should just come out with it, be straight with them, and then, no, they're my friends, and they've been kind to me since we first met. Manga is so kind that he plays with the younger kids we pass by, and Hatsume is quite understanding, so she wouldn't make fun of me for it, would she? Look, Izuku, I know you said you want to keep that info to yourself, and that's totally fine with me, Manga added. You are allowed to do whatever you want. Izuku broke off, turning his attention from his companions to the trash and debris that's strewn all around them. My quirk. Izuku's response was eagerly anticipated by his two friends. To be honest, I haven't disclosed my quirk to anyone. No one is aware of it. Not even my mother. After a long period of silence, Hatsume raised an eyebrow and Manga also appeared with a pear and one rose. It's either now or never. Suddenly there was silence. I control bugs. Is that all? Asked Manga. What? Izuku blinked. You manage bugs. With a hand beneath her chin, Hatsume inquired, how precisely? Show me, Hatsume insisted. Izuku swallowed. Everything was going well. He called over a swarm of flies from a nearby dumpster. Consider something enjoyable, non-scary, and unlikely to frighten them, such as the circus. Nothing about the circus is frightening. In response to Izuku's orders, the flies appeared, forming a ring in the air, the miniature swarm hovering in a rotating shape, with each fly being instructed to fly loops and nosedives through the air before eventually passing through the hoop. I've gotta admit, that's actually kinda cool, Izuku, Manga said. Looking at his friend, Izuku said, really? Yes, is there a problem with it? I mean, having insects so near you guys. Voiced by Manga, Not that I can see with it. Why? Did Bakugo act like a jerk once more? Has he been telling you that your peculiarity is bad? Oh, no, I simply assumed that the bugs would create a bad image, as all. PFF'd, like, announced Hatsume. If anything, your problem if that you're too squishy. Quote. Huh, you know, squishy. Well, that and pretty scrawny, too. I mean, look at those noodle arms of yours. I bet you couldn't carry a car. I'm pretty sure that I couldn't carry a car normally unless I had a strength quirk. Hatsume laughed. And what about my babies? They would increase your strength tenfold. Izuku thought about that element. Well, I suppose they could, but I'd rather not have any, augmentations to that category. My fighting style wouldn't necessarily need the use of unrefined brute strength. Fine, she complained. Be all that with your no strength providing exoskeleton apparatus mindset. There are plenty of other things I could work upon. Like pouches, special ones that can hold multiple insect species at once. Or maybe a costume to make up for that vulnerable body or yours. Izuku spoke up. The girl turned to face him and said, Oh, Hatsume. I'm sort of already working on that, actually. You are? Yeah, I have this project going on at home with a couple of golden orb spiders. I have them making a costume for me in my free time. I can only have them working when I'm within 2 blocks of my house, though. That's how far my reach is. I have a couple containers to keep them in for when I leave, to make sure mom doesn't kill them or they wander off too far. I only have 10 at the moment, so progress is kind of slow. But at least it's pure spider silk, so. Wait, pure spider silk. You can just tell them to make however much you want. Izuku started massaging the back of his head. Yeah, the only problem is making sure the spiders don't overexhaust themselves. Manga said, Why don't you make more? Izuku and Hatsume turned to him. They both said, Oh, you know. You probably have both male and female spiders, right? Yeah, 3 females and 7 males, Izuku told him. Good, well, there you go. Izuku gave his head a scratch. I don't get it. Manga pulled a face, winking face. He murmured, Never mind. Best to let you figure it out. Oh, Hatsume blurted out. She paused, her gaze focusing on Izuku's head, and said, That's why you still have bugs in your hair. Quick access defense. I like it. Manga asked, You have bugs in your hair? Yeah, you guys want to see. Izuku said, rubbing the back of his head. They gave a nod. Excellent. I'm not afraid yet. Genuinely wish to view my bugs. Keep going. You're doing well. You're capable of doing this, of completing it with. Ahem. Izuku said, yes, and reached into his hair. A house centipede with dozens of wriggling legs emerged with it when he pulled it away. This is Raikai. He's one of the first bugs that I allowed into my hair. Did he give it a name? Oh, and centipedes. Imagine the annoyance bombs I could create using their poison. I'm gonna have to get used to having insects around pretty closely, aren't I? Mused Manga. Hey, don't ruin the party, Hatsume said, intruding into Manga's personal space. Consider all the potential outcomes that these bugs could bring. Personally, I dislike the element of fear. Bugs are bugs, and there are amazing applications everywhere. Drawing away from the overly intimate girl, Manga raised his hands in surrender and said, I didn't mean it like that. When you think about it, I think bugs are really cool. All I'm afraid of is swallowing one by accident or something. Izuku grinned. Hatsume and Manga are truly wonderful friends, and they aren't at all put off by the fact that I have control over bugs. He grimaced, though, and thought of another issue. I must tell Sensei, who has treated me just as well as Hatsume and Manga, and who has a right to know. What if he expels you from the dojo? I am still able to adapt and maintain my current skill set. The following day, Izuku found himself in front of Kage Kawabata's dojo, which was still closed because Izuku had arrived well in advance of the day's scheduled meeting. Nevertheless, Izuku was positive that his teacher was there because, after all, the man essentially lived there. In addition to checking with his bugs, the man was undoubtedly inside, reading a book while sitting cross-legged in front of a tea table, and it didn't appear that he was going anywhere anytime soon. Izuku inhaled deeply as he looked out at the front of the building. He had been dreading this moment for a long time. He had felt bad about entering the dojo through a lie the first time, and it didn't sit well with him that his sensei had basically brought him in because of his lack of eccentricity. He knew that one day, no matter how much it scared him, he would have to tell the truth. He was feeling more upbeat, though, after spending yesterday with Hatsume and Manga, maybe people wouldn't shun him out of fear, maybe they could even embrace his eccentricity. He only hoped that Kawabata was the same way. As he started up the stairs, his hand poised to tap on the formidable wall separating him from an uncertain future, he was taken aback when the door suddenly opened on its own and Cage Kawabata appeared in the doorway. "Midoriya, isn't this a pleasant morning? Come on, enter now, we have a lot to talk about." What's he talking about? How did he know I was at the door? He heard a tap on his shoulder and looked up to see his sensei's arm there. I really need to get that muttering under control. It could prove disastrous in real combat, Izuku said, laughing nervously as he followed the older man inside. The low standing table was occupied by the two. "Tea?" Kawabata inquired. Izuku nodded, and Kawabata poured him a cup, which he drank slowly, waiting until he had the courage to speak, during which he started to feel anxious. "Since I manage bugs, I wouldn't blame him, but I have a duty to tell him the truth because he has taught me so much and I can't keep lying to him. What will he think? What will happen? Will he be afraid?" When he sipped, he found that the china cup was empty and that there was no heat or liquid coming from it. With a sigh, he raised his head and met Kawabata's eyes directly. Izuku swallowed and said, "Sensei, I have a confession to share." The man just nodded, allowing Izuku to go on. "I lied to you." Izuku's eyes started to well up with tears as the waterworks started. "I said that I was quirkless, but however, I'm not. I am able to control bugs. And with control that is frighteningly precise. Enough that that alone would make me a hero." He opened his mouth to say, but, I was just so, but Kawabata cut him off as his breath caught and he reached for his sleeve to wipe his face. "Slow down, Midoriya, there's no need to cry over such a predicament. However, Sensei, I am already aware of it. You know, your quirk. Actually, I've known for a while. But why, how come I haven't ejected you yet?" Izuku looked down in embarrassment and nodded slightly. Kawabata continued, taking another sip of tea. "Midoriya, I never did tell you about my own quirk. I rarely tell most of my students about it, and I never felt the need to tell you either." Another drink. "It's called cognition. To put it briefly, I have the ability to sense brainwaves and the objects that are the focus of the thoughts I detect. I sensed those insects when you flew them in here just a moment ago. They were yelling resolve, confession, and guilt thoughts. I knew you were close by and had figured out why you were here. I was aware that you had finally made the decision to share your peculiarity with me. That's how you knew I was at the door." "Yes," Kawabata nodded. "How long have you been aware of it?" "It was one of our first lessons together, actually, when you had that fly stuck in my sleeve." Izuku resignedly remarked, "I discovered that I could track your movements, if I wanted." "Yes, at first, I was a little taken aback, and I nearly called you out at that moment. Is the ostensibly normal boy suddenly showing signs of mental affinity for a random fly? And at that moment, were the two of them experiencing the same feelings? Well, if that didn't shout, quirk." Izuku stood up and said, "I understand, Sensei. I'll just pack up my things and." Izuku stumbled, but he listened to his teacher and sat down again. "Not so fast, Midoriya. As I was saying," Kawabata went on, "I was a little upset when I found out. However," he emphasized, "your thoughts revealed who you really were. Dishonor, guilt, and, most unexpected of all, fear. I realized then that you were hiding your quirk because you were afraid to use it, not because you wanted to gain an advantage. When you think about the nature of insects, a young child's mind can be very quick to make judgments. After all, not many are kind to them." Izuku glanced up and blinked a few times, wondering if that meant. "That's how I've evaluated your character, Midoriya," the man said, taking another sip of his tea. "Your thoughts, and what I've learned from you while you've been here. And you're a decent person, Izuku. Your peculiarity shouldn't define who you are. Remember that." By this point, the tears had stopped and a small smile had taken their place, revealing his relief. "I thank you, Sensei," he said. "I'm grateful for everything you've done for me. And I can see why you would want to get rid of me. Midoriya, you shouldn't worry. I have no intention of barring you from this dojo at any point in the future. No one deserves a place in here more than you do. Really, yes, Just make me a promise. Sensei, of course. The boy with the most amazing smile arrived. You try your hardest to gain admission to UA. And don't listen to anyone who tells you differently. One day, you have the potential to become a great hero. So, ma'am, that's 2 bowls of pork cutlet. Yes please, Inko Midoriya said. Oh, and is it possible for us to get additional meat for one of the orders? The waiter wrote down the order on his notepad and said, of course. Would that be all? Thank you, indeed. The waiter then left after Inko answered. Mom. Yes, Izuku, the woman asked, turning to face the voice. What is the reason for our return? This place appears to be rather pricey. The boy was right, as the corner exuded a certain air of high etiquette, with its candlelit tables and tense wait staff revealing the type of atmosphere the restaurant avoided. I told you already, I recently received a promotion at work. I believed that a location like this would allow us to celebrate. However, couldn't we have simply gone to the typical location? After all, we're only getting Katsuden. Oh, Izuku, you're no fun. Going to a place like this occasionally won't do any harm. Also, the meat is better quality here. Well, I guess. Even though this area of the city is new to us. Enough of that, huh? Enough of that, Inko said. How was today's class? It was all right, Izuku said, just the usual, you know. Kachan was in one of his more sour moods today, as evidenced by the bruises on his leg, and Izuku grimaced at that. However, you're about to enter your final year of middle school. There must be something fascinating going on in class, right? Not really, if you say so, Inko said, extending her gaze to him. Then what about Katsuki? How is he doing? It's been a while since I last saw him. Izuku, who had yet to inform her of the changes in his relationship with Bakugo, grimaced once more. She already has too much on her plate, so it's best not to add to her worries. During lunch, he and his friends just played games with me, meaning, roughed me up and chased me down. As usual. Inko hummed, noticing her son's glum response to her inquiries. He had been acting this way whenever she brought up school, but she didn't want to press the issue, so she changed the way she asked. And your training? That he could discuss it made Izuku tense. It's doing great, Mom. That caused Inko to smile. Aside from training with Kawabata Sensei, I've been practicing with my quirk, trying to increase my range and, Izuku went on, but he stopped when he saw something at the edge of his stated range. Inko didn't exactly know what Izuku was doing with his quirk, even though he may have told his mother about it only a month ago after telling his sensei. In fact, Izuku was currently searching the now unfamiliar area of the city for anything illicit or illegal, and it turned out that he had discovered another criminal hideout not far from where he was. Honey, Mom, yes. Some of my bugs are starting to get a little hungry. Would you mind if I? Oh, naturally. In addition, I would much rather have you feed them in the bathroom than out here. Proceed. Thank you, Mother. He picked up his bag and hurried to the bathroom, where he started looking for anyone. The flies he sent in searched the stalls, a rather obscene but necessary method, and concluded that they were empty. Excellent. He turned again, focusing on an entry point, opening the bathroom door and sending out a couple of scout flies, just in case, because he didn't want someone to interrupt him while he was getting ready, and he'd prefer to have a 10-second warning beforehand if it was inevitable. He had just recently begun to search for such things whenever he went somewhere new, and his initial scouting had shown that this restaurant had discreet access to the outside via a bathroom window, constant vigilance in case he needed to act with his quirk. As he approached the window, he unlatched the pane and let the cool night air in. Izuku inhaled deeply, and a few seconds after he lowered his head, thousands of insects swarmed inside and gathered around him. Izuku reached into his pack and pulled out a black, lightweight cloak he had asked his mother to get from a costume store, making sure with his bugs to eat up any trace of methodology that might link the cloak to him or his mother, including the costume store label and any stray DNA. The cloak acted to remove any connections between him and his vigilante persona, and now that he was less cautious with his quirk, he needed to preserve his secret identity because, after all, any news of a vigilante with a potential bug mutation quirk would be quite problematic. He realized after a few near misses how easily his bugs could be discovered, and thus connected to him. He always carried 2 fireflies in his hair, which now reached just past his neckline, and 2 tiny lights echoed in his hair as the flyers swarmed into the cloth. The fireflies positioned themselves inside the hood of the cloak, like 2 primitive eyes that glowed a glowing yellow, and the figure rose into the air, making a faint buzzing sound. The now floating cloak obscured from view by the shadows cast on its apertures, as though its eyes were the only thing inside it, and it remained motionless for a few seconds before darting out the open window. Izuku nodded and grinned, finished the task, shut the window, and went back to his table in the bathroom. He turned a corner and saw his mother. "Oh, Izuku, while you were away, the food arrived. I made sure the extra meat was in yours. Are all of your insects being fed properly?" his mother inquired. "Yes," Izuku answered, "the smaller insects served as food for the larger ones. I might be a little short right now, but that's just the way life is. Everything is in its proper place." "That's good to know," Inko said, blinking. "And your training?" "Oh, where had I gone? You mentioned range, right?" "Oh, indeed, my range has been extended to 3 blocks. His cloaked figure grabbed for a phone booth, dialing for the police, just out of sight of the building, 3 blocks from the outer edge of where he had discovered the villain's hideout. "Isn't that a pretty big thing? 3 complete coverage blocks." "Yeah, hey, who is this? Track this call and follow." His bug's feminine voice echoed, "I have found a villain hideout at this location." The insect sensed something odd close by, and suddenly stopped making noise. Within his sphere of influence, a figure emerged, leaping from rooftop to rooftop and slowly closing in. His few scouts discovered that the figure was primarily dressed in black, with a long, loose cloth hanging from his neck. His face. And I can sense what the insects can see and hear. It's especially helpful for surveillance and spying and stew. Just as the black-clad jumper reached a rooftop overlooking the scene, the insect-infested figure turned around. Numerous insects nearby cast discreet glances at the figure on the rooftop. Upon closer inspection, the long piece of fabric turned out to be a scarf. The figure's hair was long, nearly as long and styled as Izuku's own at the moment. Most noticeable, however, were the characteristic yellow goggles that he wore over his eyes. Eraserhead. Uh-oh. They both looked down at each other, waiting for the other to initiate contact. The Erasure hero's own black lens was punctured by the yellow eyes of the robed figure. Each seemed to persuade the other to take action. A few seconds later, Eraserhead jumped. "Izuku, is there a problem?" "What?" Returning his focus to his mother, Izuku inquired, "What do you mean?" "Well, this face was all you were doing. You also sounded concerned about something. Are you all right?" "Oh, yes, I'm simply..." Izuku turned his figure down a side alley, Eraserhead hot on his heels, following what appeared to him to be a suspicious, floating figure. Simply gliding over obstacles, including big dumpsters and other debris that would otherwise impede the pursuing hero, the cloaked insects were able to throw the hero of Izuku's trail fairly effectively, though not completely. Even as he ran, Eraserhead's hair was floating upwards and his eyes were glowing an eerie red, as seen by quick glances with other bugs. Izuku knew that the hero was using his quirk, and the hero would undoubtedly assume from this encounter that he was chasing a rather oblique mutation type. Izuku would be fine as long as they both kept their distance, but he couldn't let the hero see what was under the cloak, and he couldn't stop that in hand-to-hand combat, or the lack thereof. The manner of his fake body. Izuku started to think, bringing different escape plans to life in his mind, and he started to scatter insects everywhere, being cautious to make sure his activities were not seen. "Izuku, do you want dessert?" "Yeah. Must remain for a while." "All right, what are you looking for?" "The fudge brownie with ice cream. Taiyaki. Mock. Taiyaki. Or whatever takes longer." "What the heck?" He was craving red bean paste. Inko arched an eyebrow. "All right, plan F. There, an opening." Thousands of bugs from his fake body abandoned the cloak, swarming and streaming their way into an open water drain. The insects left no trace, leaving only the cloak that hid their presence. The insect skidded the alley's corner and onto the street, then immediately veered to the left, creating a rough 5-second window to begin a retreat. "That's a shame. Izuku, what is it?" That boy leapt in his seat. "Whoa, that was allowed. That needs to be fixed." "Oh, nothing." He bit into the fish-shaped cake he was holding and remarked, "It's a shame we could only have one dessert. That was a nice cloak, though. I'll have to see how I can get another one without Mom getting suspicious." "We could get Mo." "No, there's no need to spend more time here," Izuku cried, and he flinched away after realizing how he had unintentionally yelled. "The higher costs here are something we can avoid. In addition, I should take note to be careful around here at night, as it's likely right in front of Eraserhead's patrol routes, and I'd prefer to avoid staying so close to Eraserhead, just in case. Izuku, are you certain you're alright? Once more, you're muttering. Additionally, you've been acting strangely all night. Yes, I suppose I'm just exhausted. He turned to face the storm drain, where Eraserhead was now studying the cloak that Izuku's insectoid form had left behind, the erasure hero clutching the cloth before looking around for his prey. The man tsked and ran off, returning to the isolation of the rooftops. I need to be more cautious now that I'm definitely on Eraserhead's radar. Another near miss. Through the window of his mother's car, Izuku looked up at the rooftops and saw the hazy shadow gradually disappear into the night. Officer Iwasaki, a pro hero, especially one who operates underground, rarely made the effort to show up at the station on their own initiative. The officer raised an eyebrow and expressed his perplexity. Eraserhead, why have you come here? The hero merely replied nonchalantly, an update. Regarding one of your ongoing cases. Oh, is there something that Eraserhead should notice? Is it Stendhal or Arcswan? Let's approach one of the debriefing rooms first. The hero and the policeman approached the debriefing room, both of them silent, and then they went behind closed doors. Iwasaki said, so, pulling out an inkwell and some blank paper, what do you have for us? After passing the cloth over his shoulders to Iwasaki, Eraserhead opened his mouth and said, snitch. Iwasaki raised his eyebrows in shock, saying, snitch. Are you certain? This is her cloak. Wait. Eraserhead gave a nod. Iwasaki rubbed the cloak and said, it's kind of ordinary. Iwasaki waved his hand over it and said, there's nothing particularly noteworthy about it. If it helps, there are no signs of ink either. Suppliers are unable to track it. Are you certain it's hers? Totally. She was making one of her notorious calls when I got there. That was approximately 2 hours ago. That would be the one at that club, with the secret basement hideaway. Wait, where were you then? The officer said, blinking. Just now, we stormed the place with death arms. I fell while chasing the suspect. We left the scene quite a distance away, and I must say that she is a very cunning vigilante. Flipped me around a couple of times. She got away. The cloak was all I got. Instead of going on a goose hunt, I chose to complete my patrol. All right, I support. Hold on, you did see her appearance beneath it, didn't you? That's excellent, excellent. We can finally set up a description of her after all this time, Iwasaki said, using his quirk to make the ink turn into words on paper that were as clear and structured as any computer could create. Give me a quick overview of her appearance, and I can. I didn't. Iwasaki's scribble came to a sudden halt. Didn't what? I failed to spot her. By the time I discovered the cloak, the spy had long since left. Oh, shoot, Iwasaki said with a sadness that quickly gave way to curiosity. But, why would she leave it behind, then? With such a tidy escape, there would be no necessity. Why leave behind something that might help us find her? That, Iwasaki, is what I intend to find out. As soon as Shota Aizawa exited the station, he saw a blonde, spiked hair flare to his left and side as he reached the bottom steps. Hey, Shota, how are things going? The figure cried out. I'm fine, Aizawa replied. What's going on? That hurts, yelled Hazashi, clutching at his heart. Can a friend simply visit a friend? Aizawa just began to move. Hazashi whimpered, Shota, wait up. So, he asked after catching up to his friend. So what? Tell me, old buddy, old pal, why'd brought you in there? You usually never end up directly speaking with the police. Aizawa responded, I had an update for one of their long-running cases. Most of the information on the case is within the police database, due to the nature of the case. I needed to see what else they had so I could find a lead. Oh, how so? What's got you so interested? Snitch. Her, the mysterious snitch. She's quite a case, ain't she? She is. I encountered her on my patrol. You did. Where's she at then? Police custody. Or was her quirk too volatile for that? Is she being watched by other heroes, maybe? Shota merely glared at his friend. Hazashi questioned incredulously, what? She got away. How? This is like, what? The first time someone has escaped from you. One more look. Third, there was both Quill and Arson. With a tilt of his head, Hazashi said, I remember them. Both mutation types. Huge pains to fight. You think Snitch is one? Not sure, but I believe it's possible. And why's that? I tried erasing her quirk. It didn't work, she just kept going. However, she was levitating. It was either through a mutant quirk or some sort of device, if the faint buzzing I picked up on is anything to go by. Besides, she was able to notice my presence before I came into view. That points towards a sensory quirk. Hazashi gave a shoulder shrug. Well, you've got to admit, at least it was a vigilante this time, less likely to retaliate in lethal force towards heroes, and at least doing good rather than crime. With his chin rubbed and his eyes squinted in contemplation, Hazashi assumed an exaggerated pose. You didn't see anything that could hint towards a possible mutation. Body parts. Never got a view under the cloak. Hands. Covered by the sleeves. Face. 2 yellow eyes, that's all. Well, how about her feet? Oh. So Snitch does levitate, just like Emmy told us. Aizawa's eye flickered just a little. He let out another sigh. Yes, it was as she said. Sweet. I've got another reason for a get-together. Wait until Emmy hears about this. Please don't. I like speaking to her on my own terms. Aizawa gave his friend a look. Fine, but only because you asked nicely. On the other hand, there's still, hey, where you going? Erasure hero Eraserhead Aizawa was once more leaping up the sides of 2 buildings until he reached the summit. With his capture device ready at his neck, his goggles glinted in the bright moonlight. I'm gonna take a look around. Never know, I might stumble upon Snitch again. But you've already been at it for 7 hours. You need to sleep, you know. It's not healthy if you don't. Aizawa gave a head nod. All right, I'll only be gone for an additional hour, but I will definitely be watching more closely for Snitch because this case won't be forgotten until it is resolved. Eraserhead vanished into the night after that. Hold on, Hazashi shouted. We still haven't talked about whether or not you're gonna accept that job opening. As his friend shrank farther away, Hazashi Yamada gazed after him. He let out a sigh. Ah well, we'll go over it tomorrow. Nimori and I can gang up in him then. Hazashi then put his hands in his pockets and continued walking home. Until another thought occurred to me. Ah shoot, I still need to finalize everything for tomorrow's show, he exclaimed, rapidly increasing his pace until he was running home. All right, class, pay attention. The instructor said, since you are all 3rd years, it's time for you to seriously think about your future. I'd pass out handouts for your future plans now, but you're pretty much all planning to go into the hero course, right? The class erupted in a flurry of shouts and hollers as different people began to use their peculiarities more. The instructor started to calm them down. Now, I must remind you that quirk usage prohibited on school premises. You all. Bakugo shouted, don't lump us all together as a group. Together, I'm not gonna be stuck at the bottom like all of these rejects. The students started to express their disapproval. Izuku Midoriya's eye twitched slightly in irritation not far back. How could he be trying to be a hero or anything? Oh, if I remember correctly, you want to go to UA. Hi, right, Bakugo, replied the instructor. That's right, I aced the mock, the teacher said. Ah, it says here that so does Midoriya. The entire class fell silent. Then a little chuckle broke out, followed by a roar of disbelief at Izuku's chances. Breathe deeply, deeply, keep them away. Bakugo's hand gave off a faint crackle. Izuku let out a sigh. Once more, here we go. He looked out the window, pretending to be uninterested. You listen here, Deku. Bakugo exclaimed as he got up from him. Bakugo growled, I'm the only one here that's going to get into UA, you hear? At that, hey, are you listening to me? Bakugo stepped forward to set off an explosion on top of Izuku's desk. Izuku leapt from the desk to avoid the assault, his eyes widening as his insects tracked Bakugo's movements. The desk collapsed in two as the force's brunt was redirected towards it after losing its target. Izuku grinned a little, regretfully. Bakugo noticed the look. Well, looky here, sneered Bakugo. Izuku's smile vanished as he said, think you're so special, huh? Dodging that, he stood, but he was pressed up against the classroom's rear wall. Bakugo went on with his remarks. Well, guess what? You're below the rejects. You're quirkless. I haven't shown you, though. He instantly went to shut down the part of him that tried to reach for his bugs. He inhaled deeply once more. In and out, Izuku continued to lean against the wall, breathing deliberately and keeping his eyes closed. What? Not gonna say anything, Deku? The bugs in front of Izuku looked out. Bakugo's eyes gleamed with apparent victory, that manic glee that comes from feeling superior to inferior. Izuku remembered to maintain his control on Elise even though the scene bubbled and boiled in his mind. He gave a verbal retort in response, instead of a physical one. I don't need to say anything to you. Bakugo's face was filled with anger. What was that? Bakugo's hand racked with a larger explosion. You. Bakugo. Midoriya, stop your fighting. I don't want to have to send you both to the principal again. And I highly doubt the classroom can handle any more damage from your antics. Bakugo snarled but returned to his chair. Izuku started to follow suit, but he stopped. She had nowhere to sit because the first explosion had destroyed his desk. With another sigh, he sat back against the wall and went to get his things. The instructor didn't express any worry or awareness. As the class continued, Bakugo continued to fume silently about what had happened earlier, and Izuku once more used his bugs to observe his surroundings, utterly distracted from the teacher's lecture. After all, it wasn't as though he would ever be called upon. The school day soon came to an end when the bell rang. Izuku waited for the majority of the class to depart, as is customary. But Bakugo and his friends remained behind, just as he had predicted. After all, Bakugo wasn't known for ignoring such a danger to his pride. As the three of them started to approach, he started packing his things. But when Bakugo grabbed his notebook, the unexpected occurred. Izuku hadn't expected the move, and he hadn't done that before. Simply put, he hadn't paid attention to what his bugs had observed in time. Standing ominously in front of Izuku, Bakugo remarked, "We're not done talking yet, Deku." His gaze landed on Izuku, then shifted to the notebook. He recited, "Hero analysis for the future." Instead, behind him, the other two started to swarm, shouting insulting things about Izuku. "Give it back," said Izuku. Bakugo just sneered, causing a small explosion to burn the notebook. Izuku winced inwardly. Izuku, however, sent a few flyers after Bakugo as he attempted to toss the book out the window, catching it before it reached the water below. "Listen here, Deku, I'm the only one from this dump that's going to get out of here and get into UA. So you better get off your high horse and think realistically. I don't care what Horns or No Face are telling you. You're nothing." Bakugo left with the final word before the three of them started to leave. "Heck, who knows? Perhaps you'll get a quirk in your next life. Just take a swan dive off the roof, will ya?" Izuku stood there thinking about what Bakugo had said. What if I did? There and then I could screw him over. He would never be accepted to UA. So, however, I wouldn't. Of course, not with me here. Izuku went outside after checking with his bugs to make sure Bakugo and his friends had left the school. As he walked past his classroom window, he noticed that flies and dragonflies were supporting his notebook. He got it back and started to walk home. After a while, he considered his friends. He didn't have much time to spend with them, so it was unfortunate that they lived in different neighborhoods. The fact that schoolwork interfered and kept get-togethers to the weekends didn't help either. He started to consider his school predicament once more as he got closer to an overpass. Once more, his mind wandered to Bakugo. If only it were possible to. A hint of sludge moving strangely from a manhole cover caught his attention, and he turned. The crawling pace of the sludge accelerated. In a matter of seconds, it roughly shaped itself into a humanoid shape and then sped in Izuku's direction, encasing him in sludge. "Wow," the sludge replied, "you noticed me pretty quickly there. I had to speed up my formation. Some sort of sensory quirk, maybe. I could use that, actually have a way to avoid him." Izuku started to get anxious. There was no question that a villain was attacking him. Fear and horror were growing as he realized that he was suffocating and that he was going to die. He suppressed his feelings and reached for his bugs. He started working out a strategy. His clone of a skittering bug started to take shape, collecting insects from the surroundings. Their agitation was evident from the buzzing, which filled the air with an indescribable jarring of sounds. "Let me go." The villain from Sludge blinked in disbelief. He looked at the chittering mass of bugs, the creatures piled on top of each other, falling apart and rebuilding quickly, and said, "Oh shit, that's you. I'm gonna be honest with you kid, that is a whole lot levels creepy, many times overboard more than me. And look at me, I'm an amorphous killer slime. Is he not afraid? But who am I kidding? It's just bugs. What are they gonna do to me, huh? Nice try, but I'm sorta of in a hurry so." Of course, he was correct. The bugs were either sucked into the villain's body or died upon contact. It only made the villain more irritated. As the sludge tightened, Izuku was squeezed and suffocated even more. Don't worry, little invisibility cloak, we're almost there. Izuku was at a loss for what to do. Something he couldn't hurt, he couldn't exactly beat up, could he? He searched his brain, trying to think of a way to offset the villain's peculiarity. Some kind of weakness had to exist. He scanned the entire form of the villain with his bugs, looking at it once more. A light bulb then developed. Another scheme started to come to fruition. He was aware of their path and the bugs that were causing them to travel through the area. He extended his hand and summoned one of the hives he had been tending to on his daily strolls to and from school. Jay frequently avoided using it, but he was now left with little option. Then there was a fresh buzzing. The villain encountered a swarm of native Japanese hornets. When he saw them coming, the slime gave a little yelp. Don't hold him responsible. After all, these hornets are quite frightening. Let go, or else, he made his swarm and the new hornets demand. His eyes were rolled by the sludge. Look kid, I already said before. My air is running low. I'll show him. Can't breathe, can't breathe. The sludge villain was swarming with hornets. But instead of attacking haphazardly, they had a specific objective. They gathered around the villain's eyes and alternately injected the soft tissue with their stingers. With a cry of pain, the villain let go of Izuku and thrashed around the overpass. Izuku coughed up extra sludge and was barely able to stand as he gasped for air. His thoughts remained hazy, and the black spots in his vision persisted. Dispersing his bugs, he was able to focus his eyes a bit more. The charge was followed shortly by a clattering of metal and a voice that was instantly recognizable. It's all right now, Yun, huh? Izuku recognized his childhood hero and immediately glanced over. Izuku stood there, slack-jawed, and stared. All Might looked around and saw that the sludge he had been pursuing earlier was largely contained. There were pieces of him scattered everywhere, but only a tiny piece, roughly the size of the villain's face, was writhing back and forth. The boy he had heard struggling earlier was standing in what he assumed was awe, and he was comparatively unharmed. Izuku rushed forward, jumping up and down with joy in front of his idol. All Might. Sir, it's really you. All Might said, indeed young man, and started to look around. After a while he uttered the words, aha, and went to retrieve some empty soda bottles. I must say, I'm quite impressed with you. Being able to take down such a tricky villain by yourself. And at such a young age. Amazing, he chuckled. The villain was snatched up by All Might and placed inside the soda bottles. Closing the caps tightly, All Might collected the remaining villain and asked, how did you do it anyway? Super strength, aerokinesis. Izuku answered right away, it was nothing really, just be you. Izuku was interrupted by a rough cough. He turned his attention to All Might, who was studying Izuku's notebook. My notebook, exclaimed Izuku. All Might grinned. All Might handed the notebook to Izuku and said, it's rather extensive, young man. I'm impressed yet again. When he opened it, he discovered a page signed by All Might. He's signed it already. But alas, I must go. Villainy doesn't fight itself, after all. Izuku froze, gazing at the hero's retreating form. Only All Might would know the answers to the questions he had yet to ask. All Might stretched and remarked, I'm sorry, lad, but I really have to go. Stay safe, he said, turning to the boy one last time, and All Might leapt into the air. But he was too slow to get rid of the rather vivacious boy who was now fastened to his leg. Izuku let out a mental scream. Oh shoot, it was not a good idea. I thought you were over trying to kill yourself. Izuku was desperately trying to hold on to All Might's leg as the hero tried to pull him away. Oi, there's such a thing as being too much of a fanboy, you know. Shouted All Might. He said, you should learn to keep your distance. In an attempt to get rid of the boy with the green hair. If I let go now, I'll die. Izuku responded in kind. Taking the boy's words into consideration, All Might paused. Ops, he said, laughing nervously. The boy and the hero flew through the air and finally landed on a building's roof. Good point. Just hold on tight then. We'll be down in just a minute. Izuku was let down by All Might, who started straight for the railing. Look kid, I've really got to go. But All Might, no buts, All Might interrupted his speech with a heavy cough. Soon after, steam started to leak out of his body, and he was completely changed from the symbol of peace to an unidentified nobody. Ah shoot, said All Might, who had changed. Startled, Izuku blinked. All Might, the person in front of him was unquestionably his idol. He had left the few bugs he had kept on the hero in their original location, undisturbed. All Might said glumly, "Yeah, sorry you had to see me like this, kid." Izuku questioned, What happened?" All Might chuckled a little. He lifted up his shirt to show the injury. "It was a while back ago. 5 years, actually, when I got this injury in a fight," he said. When Izuku saw it, he grimaced. 5 years ago, was that the fight with Toxic Chainsaw? All Might sighed, "I'm impressed yet again. You've done your research. My quirk, one for all, has a time limit on it now. At most, I can go harrowing for 3 hours a day." All Might let out another sigh. "Look kid, I can't have this being found out. The symbol of peace must remain a beacon of hope for all." Izuku gave a big nod. "Of course, All Might. My lips are sealed." All Might sighed once more. "Good, I trust you, you seem like a good kid," she said. He said, "Well, I might as well be going," and made his way to the exit. "Wait," shouted Izuku, "I still have some questions, if you don't mind," Izuku said in a low voice. With a decision in mind, All Might turned back to face Izuku. A few seconds later, he answered, "Might as well. You've already seen me, so, I never got your name, young man." "Oh, it's, Izuku Midoriya." "Well, alright, Midoriya. What is it that you have to ask of me?" Izuku hesitated and glanced down at his feet. He was a little anxious now that he was really going to have the opportunity to ask All Might. "Hey kid," All Might said. "It's all right. Anything you've got to ask, just go ahead. It's about my quirk. I'm not sure what to do about it." "You mean the thing that got you out of that mess of sludge? Surely a quirk like that had to be super strong to take down that villain. It would make the top ranks. What's got you so worried?" Izuku swallowed. "It's not like you imagine. My quirk, I can control bugs." Everybody might have perspired. "Bugs," Izuku explained. "Yeah, bugs. I can control them, very fine control too," as he formed a group of nearby bugs into a floating hello. "Oh, wow, that's mighty impressive, but I still don't see what's wrong," Izuku stated. "That's the problem. Hypothetically, imagine that there was a villain with an emitter quirk that focused around their eyes." All Might gave a nod. "If I really wanted to, I could neutralize them completely by placing maggots in their eyes." Every Might blinked. Or someone whose quirk emitted from their hands. I could rot the tissue with spider venom and render the hands useless. Definitely not going off in a grudge there. Or with, okay, stop. You're looking at this the wrong way." Izuku looked up, startled. "I am." All Might gave a nod. All Might rubbed his hands at the back of his head and remarked, "Yeah, you can find different uses from your quirk, from the sound of it. You could just, blind villains with your swarm. Or wrap their hands in, spider silk or something." Izuku's eyes grew wide with insight. "You're right, why haven't I thought of that before?" "Damn, personally," replied All Might, "I believe it was a sense of focusing on the negatives. Bugs are viewed as scary by many, after all. Especially so to young children such as yourself. Maybe you had a scare when you were young. Something that involved insects." Izuku reflected. "I don't think so. Maybe." Resuming his muscular form, All Might exclaimed, "Anyway, young Midoriya. Your quirk is very versatile. In fact, I can almost guarantee that you'd become a pro as long as you groom it right. Just remember, don't let your quirk define yourself. Let you define your quirk." Izuku grinned broadly at his idol's admiration. All Might stopped and patted his now empty pockets. "Now, if you don't mind, I can't stretch my time in this form much longer. I really need to get this guy," he said. "Oh shoot, I must've." In response, Izuku said, "Oh, right. The bottles, I almost forgot." Izuku commanded his bugs to move, and 2 soda bottles filled with sludge emerged from a concealed mass at the roof's corner. Might reached for them and tucked them into his pockets. Izuku rubbed his head and said, "I kind of slipped them out of your pockets with my grip. I noticed them falling when we were in the air." All Might gave a thumbs up and exclaimed, "My gosh, young Midoriya. You nearly gave me a heart attack. But I've got to say, nice job." Izuku leapt. But it was my fault the villain almost got loose." Everyone chuckled. "Nonsense. I should have been paying attention to this fellow. Your quick actions prove that you're hero material already, even." "Thank you, All Might." Obviously, I'll see you. The symbol of peace then leapt away, leaving Izuku on the rooftop in confusion. Drive, Nakai, sir. The physician turned to face the nurse who had captured his interest. Kanako, yes, he inquired. The nurse said, it's about the, patient that we got an hour ago, with tact. The one that the media has labeled the, sludge villain. The doctor asked, raising an eyebrow. Quote, yes sir, she said with a lively nod. Before they processed him, he came here for a standard examination, right? Was there a problem? I believed that heroes were observing him. Sir, that isn't it. The examination revealed something rather, well. Yes, because he has a mutation quirk, he is primarily composed of sludge. The only remaining tissue in his body is his eyes. And it's his eyes, you know. They have been harmed. Irreparably so. What did you mean? Here, sir, the nurse said, pulling out a file folder. We snapped a few photos for documentation. Nakai reached for the folder, opened it, and shrank back in horror. Oh my god, what took place? There are indications that they have been stung hundreds of times, the nurse said with a grimace. Because of their strength and damage, we think they came from hornets. Luckily for him, there was no risk of death because of his physiology. Nevertheless, the amount of venom in his system would have killed a normal man. Quote, who took him out? It was All Might. The doctor rubbed his chin thoughtfully and said, oh, well, it definitely wasn't his fault. Maybe it was something in transit. Or something before All Might came along. What do you think, doctor? He's a villain, after all, and nobody would really care. I don't know, and if we don't have to, I'd rather not bother All Might. What's done is done. We'll just record it in the records and let it stand unless someone questions it. Our job is done then. Naturally, Dr. Nakai. As you say. Midoriya, do you know why you're here? A harsh voice said. Izuku said nothing. He'd had this conversation with the principal several times before, and the results were almost always the same. The principal tensed his fingers and said, you were causing trouble in class again with Bakugo, taking a breath as though he was worn out from a monotonous task. You claimed that he had attacked you. Why do you insist on pinning such things on him? Izuku had discovered that Bakugo would never be shown to be in the wrong. His actions would all be disregarded, and Izuku would bear the consequences. I am aware that today is your last day here before you leave for high school. Therefore, I'm not really able to do much. The renown that a school gained when a graduating student got into UA was something he had learned long ago. He found out how much a school's reputation was boosted by such statistics, and consequently, the greater influx of students the following year, which resulted in more funding and more pockets being filled. Since the principal had a peculiar habit of keeping his hands tented up, there was no real hand on the desk when the sound of a hand slamming the desk occurred. Izuku jumped in his seat, but he was unable to see the action with his own eyes or his bugs. Are you even listening, Midoriya? Of course, sir. Well, not really. With a sigh, the principal said, you realize how hard it is to deal with you. I have to worry about you making trouble or posing a risk every single day. That's enough. You mean how hard it is to keep things like this from leaking? In order to give Bakugo a chance to enter the UA. Izuku blinked. Isoshi Renjiro's insistence on Bakugo's good behavior was understandable, as any blemish on his record could jeopardize his chances of being accepted into the nation's most prestigious hero school. The principal paused before saying, now, Midoriya, in a foreboding tone, such accusations are unaccounted for. Do you have anything to say for yourself? This time, Izuku said nothing. Given the faint growls coming from the corners of the room, the principal's expressionless face did not convey his feelings. Leave the room. I'm over putting up with you. I should consider your departure a blessing. Izuku complied right away and left Isoshi Renjiro's office for the final time. Had you been held up again by that former principal? Asked Manga. Yeah, Izuku said. Apparently, they had me in for disturbing class once more. For the 4th time this month. What is that? Mei inquired. He really does sound like a, said another voice. A more recent addition to his circle of friends, Izuku turned to face the voice and put an end to her thoughts. A jerk. Yes, that's the word, said Pony Tsunotori, or simply a meanie, perhaps. He has to be, don't you think? Izuku responded, well, I think so, but it's not as if it matters right now. After all, we're all out of school, and I won't have to see him ever again. Just a few months earlier, Manga had brought Pony Tsunotori to the group. She had apparently come from America for family reasons. Her parents had found a new job here in Japan, and meeting Manga was a boon to her as she was still learning Japanese, and Manga's ability to pop up words on his face made him an excellent teacher, so it was no surprise that the two became good friends. Mei interrupted, saying, "Ignore him. I prefer working on my babies over ignoring people like him. I simply remove them from memory banks, and, whoa." She took out her notebook and said, "I should try that, a mind wiper. As a helmet, perhaps. No, it's too heavy. A firearm." In his own words, Izuku added, "I don't think you should do that, Mei." Mei raised her head in disbelief and said, "And why not? I can't be overly strict. All I have to do is shock the brain with electricity. Actually, a basic electro beam shot ought to be enough for the initial test." "Mei, it's not like that. Without studying neurology, you can't just tinker with someone's brain." "But hurry up, really, it isn't." But the way the brain works As their two friends argued over memory erasure inventions, Manga and Pony observed the ongoing conflict. "There they are. They're back at it," Manga said. Pony appeared a little unsure. "I think this occurs far too frequently. How much time was it the last time?" About an hour or so," Manga thought reflectively. Both of them were unable to comprehend the constant barrage of technobabble, so they kept watching. "Don't you want to stop them?" Pony inquired. "All right, fine." After a few seconds, Manga sighed and approached the debate pair, fearing inwardly that he would be coiled by the wire arrow once more. Izuku and Mei abruptly stopped their argument, and he watched the device on Mei's waist before yelling, "Stop," to make a thin wall appear. Mei was apparently being friendlier today. All right, ignore that." But, before Mei could say anything more, Manga put a palm in front of her face and stopped her. "Why did you call us out here again, Izuku?" Manga asked his green-haired friend. "To the park." "Oh," Izuku steadied himself. "It's really kind of dumb. However, we're all going to push ourselves to the limit because I've been motivated to work harder." "Quiet, train. Why would I do that?" Mei said. "All right," Izuku sighed. "I guess not you." He gestured toward a park bench, saying, "You could go tinker over there." "However, Izuku," Mei complained, "that robot we were working on is still unfinished. All of the circuitry still needs to be connected retroactively. Anyway, why did you do that?" "Silly, because I have you. All the wires and other things can be connected by your bugs." "Right, dude," Manga yelled. Izuku cleared his throat. "In any case, we must ensure that our bodies are prepared if we all wish to enter UA. Not only our peculiarities." "All right?" Izuku inquired, seeking their viewpoint. Pony turned to Manga and whispered what she was trying to say. "Well, I think it's the word amazing formed on his face." "Yeah, fantastic," Pony concluded. Izuku said, "Thank you, Pony. And you, Manga?" "Well, I guess, it doesn't hurt to try." Backquote. Mei said, "I might as well follow, but I'll be working on my babies while following along in my wake." "I suppose that's the best I can wish for," Izuku mumbled, sweating. "Thank you. I'd like to begin with." Living with a quirk like his was difficult, he sighed. He was praised for his abilities, he liked what he could do with it, and it was powerful under the right circumstances, but with his arms outstretched and his head resting back over the backrest, he sat down on the bench and closed his eyes, enjoying the sensation of sunlight on his face and the sound of the birds chirping. It simply didn't feel right. With his quirk, he would never be able to stand alone. Instead, he would always be there, on the sidelines, away from the others. The others always thought his quirk was cool, and he reflected that in his interactions with them, but he knew the truth about it. He recalled his school days. He decided that his quirk was more of a burden with what he hoped to achieve, and he never stood out because of what he could do, not necessarily. He let out another sigh, but his determination remained unwavering. "However, I have a purpose. A means of proving myself. I simply need to get into UA. That was a given. It was a total assurance. To be a pro, I simply need to." "All right, everybody, a bit more, please. But for the time being, we'll rest up here. Allow Mei to catch up as well." He opened his eyes and turned to face the fountain, where he saw a trio of girls, one with a speech bubble for a head, how does that work? And another who looked like a horse, probably because of her peculiarity, given her horns and hooves. Then he looked at the other, the clear leader of the group, with no other distinguishing features, the green-headed boy leading the other two. He shook his head, fascinated by the scene in front of him. I wonder what he has that makes the others follow him so resolutely. It must be something powerful. If only I could be like that, praised for my own qualities. A smirk came to his face as he glanced over again, thinking, why don't I go find out? After their run, Manga gasped, hey, Izuku, it looks like that guy is coming our way. The figure at mention, who had just been sitting on the park bench, caught Izuku's attention. The boy, who had blonde hair parted to the left and bangs hanging over his right, held himself rather, if that's the right word, contemptuously, and he just walked up with his hands in his pockets. Who are you? Asked Manga. My name is Monoma, the boy grinned. Neato Monoma. He didn't appear to be interested in saying anything more, so Manga stepped forward and said, and what would you like? Oh, not very much, my peers. I was just kind of absorbed in what was going on here. Izuku arched an eyebrow and said, are you training? He inquired. Exactly, Monoma confirmed. Why? Asked Manga. Instead of responding, Monoma merely approached Izuku, put a hand on his shoulder, and then furrowed his brow, which finally changed into a look of surprise and perplexity. Is everything all right? Izuku inquired, worried. Monoma took a few steps back and glanced at Izuku before turning to face the two behind him. You're quirkless, Monoma said, perplexed. Izuku winced as though he had been hit. What? With a deadpan tone, he said. How could a quirkless be leading such a group of those obviously gifted with their own? Monoma added shakily. Manga cut in. Whoa man, that's uncalled for, adding, besides, he. No, let him. It simply cannot. It doesn't work like that, said Monoma, with a hint of discomfort. You can't. When I. How can someone as yourself teach these people anything of circumstance? He asked, shaking his head, his expression returning to its previous state, his resolve appearing to steel as if he were recalling something that only he knew. Are we a helpless nobody? Izuku's eyes glowed with rage, and insects gathered around his body, chittering and buzzing, from the taller grass that covered the park floor to the beehives high in the trees. Monoma's face was filled with surprise. But, that's impossible, you can't possibly have a quirk, he said, backing away in terror, which was exacerbated by the insects that crawled on Izuku's face and hair. Izuku avoided any permanent harm, preventing any bites or stings, just letting his creatures scurry over the boy's body, but Monoma was unaware that that seemed to be the wrong thing to say, as the bugs raced towards him and quickly covered his body. Panicked, the boy screamed and fled from the three, not stopping until he came to the park's edge, where Izuku told him to get his bugs off. Subsequent viewing through Bug Scry, as Izuku considered calling it, demonstrated that Monoma was intelligent, at least in the sense that he didn't appear to want to return to Izuku's location. Manga walked slowly up to where the friends were standing and placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, saying, hey, buddy, what was that, just now? Izuku blinked in realization of what had just happened, and that seemed to shake him out of his daze. I don't know, actually. Izuku said slowly, it just sort of happened. You know, it felt kind of right. But now that I've covered him in bugs, I feel a little bad. It most likely wasn't a pleasant experience. Well, you ought not to. Mei, who was screwing a bolt into her device, screamed, he was being so pretentious and all that. He had no idea what he was getting himself into. How long have you been there? Everyone blinked, asked Manga. Well, around the time that Blondie began to lose her mind. Oh, and he's a real jerk. Aha, oh, you know, like the principal. Pony cried out. He turned back to Izuku, and Manga laughed, saying, yes Pony, like the principal guy. But that was kind of weird. What was the purpose of that? Izuku shrugged his shoulders and said, I have no idea. He was quite strange. I have no idea what triggered him. What did he mean when he said I had no peculiarities? Is that his peculiarity, observing other peculiarities, and he noticed that mine was missing? That's strange. Now that I feel even worse, I think I overreached. Izuku was approached by Manga, who grabbed his shoulders and gave him a violent shake. Whoa, dude, get out of it. For a single mutter session, that is excessive. I'm sorry, Izuku said, rubbing the back of his head. You were aware of my personality. He shook his head. In any case, we have been here long enough. He turned to the other three behind him. Onward, in the direction of UA. Yay, the group shouted apathetically, but they still followed Izuku's lead because, after all, UA was the objective. The school term didn't begin for another few months, but that didn't make it any less of a concern for Izuku, who was walking up to the expansive campus ahead of him on a Saturday. In fact, he was here for a completely different reason. The building he reached was located in the far corners, close to the edge of the fencing, and was separate from the main campus. He entered through the big, imposing gates and followed the signs. He entered through the automatic glass doors, which were bigger than one might associate with normal. That's very considerate of UA, but why are the doors so large? Maybe for those with gigantification quirks. It made sense, given why he was here, that the reception room was quiet and empty when he arrived, and luckily, another person soon left the side room, quietly cursing as they went. Given the rather obtrusive board that protruded from his back, it was likely that his belongings were not approved, which violated Rule 3, nothing larger than one's own person. From the other side of the door came a voice that sounded indifferent. Next. Izuku entered, but he froze as he saw the man in front of him. He had only seen him up close once before, technically speaking, but that was enough to ingrain the image in his mind. The man had black clothes and hair that was just a little bit longer than his own. Eraserhead. Name. Without considering Izuku's present condition, the man inquired. He doesn't know. He shouldn't know. You need to maintain your composure, avoid raising suspicions, and behave normally. Ah, sorry, Eraserhead. After a brief moment of hesitation, the man's hand resumed its motion across the paper. Oh no, I probably shouldn't have even recognized him, let alone mentioned his name. I apologize. Simply put, aren't you an Eraserhead? Since you looked somewhat worn out and you matched the few reports that have been posted online, I assumed you were. Considering your late-night patrols, it makes sense. Well, dig yourself a hole deeper. Eraserhead regarded Izuku with what appeared to be a curious gaze, but he merely said again, name. Ah, Izuku Midoriya, sir. Eraserhead noted it. Why was it there? Izuku made his way to his pack. These sticks, sir, he said, taking them from his backpack, are specialized tools used in a variety of fighting techniques. They're I know what they are, kid, called Aizawa. Izuku swallowed and said, of course. What exactly is your quirk? The man asked, tilting his head in observation. Is it centered around CQC? He inquired slowly. Improved reflexes. I must exercise caution in this matter. Oh, no, well, you see. To put it mildly, it was quite the spectacle for an unprepared viewer, but the man in front of him showed little notice other than a slightly raised eyebrow. Insects started to crawl out from under his hair, skittering over his scalp and sides of his face. Others sprouted from his bag, emerging through the open slots. He muttered, Entomokinesis, and why are the Eskrima sticks necessary? I know how to use them, I guess. And Muay Thai, I spend more time on my own time, but I also do a little sillet. The man just went on. So you've been training your body, along with your quirk. Izuku smiled broadly. Yes sir. All Eraserhead did was look at Izuku. Nervous gulps formed at Izuku's throat as he started to perspire in anticipation. Eraserhead reached under the counter and picked up a piece of paper. After starting to write, he tore a slip off and gave it to Izuku. These should be fine, he said, gesturing to the sticks. Bring this in with you on the exam date. It'll allow you entry with your equipment. Izuku just nodded, picked up the slip, and went outside. Unaware that he had been holding his breath, he finally released it as soon as he was outside the building. Fantastic, fantastic. I can be certain that he has no suspicions about me. He let out a sigh. Perhaps he'll dismiss it as nerves. Now there's no use worrying about it. He turned around and looked at UA as he started to leave. Yes, I do still have a goal to accomplish. Well guys, this is it. UA. The most prestigious school for heroics in all of Japan, if not the world, Manga said, gesturing toward the campus with his hands extended. The three, Manga, Mei, and Pony, were surrounded by people their own age. As eager and hopeful as ever to pass the entrance exams and get into the school, they bustled around in anticipation. Their futures and, eventually, their ability to become heroes would be determined by the events of this day. Be ready to fight tooth and claw for a position within its halls, and, ow. The girl next to him slapped Manga, causing him to flinch. Say, cut that out already, Mei said. I have enough of that commentating when Izuku and I are working. Oh, Manga chuckled. That doesn't seem to stop you from getting your inventions to the point of being able to use me as a guinea pig every time. And there's nothing wrong with that. If anything, you're the best of us for it. You can't get any head injuries, after all. Doesn't mean it still doesn't sting, oh holy queen of the scrapyard, Manga chided. Mei complained, oi, I resent that. With a slight smile, Pony continued, she's kind of right, though. You're the most resilient of us all. Gah, not you too, Manga sputtered, clutching at his heart in mock agony. Where's Izuku when you need him? I wouldn't be under such an onslaught if he were here. Mei gave her head a scratch. Yeah, where is he, anyway? Didn't we all agree to meet here? The lost friend was mentioned, though, as the pitter-pattering of footsteps echoed behind the group almost as if by demand. Izuku roared, breathless, I'm here. As he charged into the crowd. Sorry that, I'm late, I sorta got sidetracked this morning. Manga raised a fictitious eyebrow. He laughed and huffed. It was that commotion up near the railways with that gigantification villain, wasn't it? Yeah, Izuku laughed and said. Manga went on, well, that's alright, that's just how you are. Such an extreme hero otaku. No biggie. I'm not, keep denying it all you want, Greenie. It's the truth, Mei replied. Izuku turned to face the lone friend who had yet to express her thoughts. Pony. She giggled a little, they're not wrong. I mean, look at those notebooks of yours. Izuku let out a resigned sigh. All right, is there anything else we have planned for out here? Nope, we still have a good 7 minutes before we need to be seated, though, Manga replied. Well, we might as well go in, right? Getting to our seats might be a bit tough if wait until the last second, Pony thought. After voicing their agreement, the friends set out for the famed UA. Until Izuku stopped motionless, hands out, that is. Watch out for that crack, Izuku said. The group of friends noticed an indenture on the ground when they looked down. That's a fairly unnoticeable crack, Manga said in her voice. I'm pretty sure you couldn't trip on it if you wanted. Unless you were really nervous, your foot probably couldn't even get at the angle to trip you up. Although it was barely perceptible and unlikely to cause someone to lose their footing, the slight depression extended a centimeter or two into the ground. Izuku squatted down and looked at the crack after humming in agreement. That's not why I pointed it out, though. Izuku, Pony requested. The boy in question cocked his head in the direction of the crevice. He put his hand down close to the area, collecting a few ants up his sleeve, and said, it actually leads down to an ant colony, just below us. Just a vast network of tunnels and rooms, it looks like it's been around for a while, too. Izuku eventually stood up and shook his head. He waved to his new passengers. I apologize, I got caught up in the moment again, but I could use a couple of these guys later. The group started walking in the direction of the auditorium. Still think it's weird, you being able to be so calm around insects, Manga replied. Izuku's face lit up with nostalgia when he said, yeah, but they kind of were my first friends before I had you guys, you know. It feels like it was just yesterday that I had Raikai bundled in my hair. Now all I have left are his children. A good amount of them too. All those centipedes crawling and squirming in my room and my clothes, free to do as they please. Everyone in the group shivered together. Naturally, they prevented their friend from noticing. By now, they had grown accustomed to his thoughts about insects and bugs. For the most part. Soon after, the group arrived at the large auditorium, which was already crowded with potential students. Izuku remarked, well, looks like this is it. I truly do appreciate you all being my friends. I don't think I'd have gotten this far without you guys, he said, sniffling as he turned to face the others. No matter what happens, you've been truly great friends. Pony leapt to give him a hug. Ah, don't be like that. We'll all get in for sure. We've been training day in and day out. Now, don't you not get in, mister. I'll be sorely disappointed if you don't. Mei responded. She ran off, saying, now, if you'll excuse me, I have some babies to make. To the support exam. Asterism. Thanks guys. After exchanging good wishes, they headed to their seats. Izuku dispersed his bugs throughout the room, essentially scouting the competition. A few individuals caught his attention, but primarily because of their peculiar mutations or other physical characteristics. Izuku would simply have to wait and see what everyone could do because no one cried out for instant competition. After all, the majority of the truly exceptional individuals would have already gained admission through recommendations. He simply needs to see who fell between the cracks. Izuku made the regrettable discovery that Bakugo was one of the designated companions next to him while he was settling into his seat near the back. Fantastic. Izuku walked slowly to his seat, a little afraid of the confrontation that would inevitably occur. He hadn't seen his old friend in a long time, and he wasn't sure what would happen. But he was not questioning the animosity that would exist. Izuku noticed Bakugo twitch just a little as he got closer. It wouldn't end there, of course. Bakugo asked, "The hell are you here, Deku?" While Izuku sat, Izuku remained silent, which only served to enrage the irate boy more. However, they were soon interrupted by a loud announcement. The pro-hero stood with his ear to the crowd and said, "Hello everyone. Welcome to today's show. Can I get a, hey?" Quiet. However, that did not make the man falter. What a refined response. "Oh, Present Mike is here, so awesome." Present Mike continued by explaining the upcoming test, including terms like Goombas and Thwomps, and the point system that went along with them. Bakugo, meanwhile, persisted in expressing his agitation. Bakugo became even more enraged when Izuku chose to ignore the taunts. Izuku tried to focus on Present Mike, thinking, "It's strange. He still isn't aware of my peculiarity after all this time, or my instruction. Deku, what's with those sticks, huh? Think you can defend yourself with some flimsy wood? My Eskrima sticks, ah. Indeed, he has also not yet seen these. If you think," he said again, his voice irritated. "Hey, you two in the back. Stop your chit-chat, you are causing a disruption for all of us." The two of us. However, I haven't spoken. Izuku looked over at the source of the voice. His bugs showed a dark-haired boy who looked pretty serious. Upon closer inspection with his bugs, it was discovered that his legs were adorned with cold metal. They protruded, seemingly resembling exhaust ports. Maybe a relative of Ingenium. The boy went on, "And Mr. Present Mike, sir. It says here that..." Izuku shook his head, accepting the disdain of those in his vicinity. Ignoring the boy next to him's death stare, he listened to the remainder of the demonstration. With the exception of a few deep breaths and foot scuffling, the bus that had been assigned to transport the participants of Site B was largely silent. The majority of the apprehensive pupils were standing and waiting for their next instructions when it reached its destination. Izuku had been collecting his bugs during the bus ride. They were among the hundreds of thousands in his immediate area, as were those he could sense in the city that had been recreated in front of him. A tiny percentage of those bugs coincidentally detected a familiar figure coming up behind Izuku. When he turned around, the boy with the stern expression from before was there. He said, "Why exactly are you here?" Izuku connected to the extensive network of bugs that lived in the virtual cityscape and asked, "What?" He now had control over every sight, smell, sound, and touch of the nearby blocks. "I didn't even speak. All of that was Bakugo. By association, why am I suddenly a nuisance? A delinquent shouldn't think that they can get to a school as prestigious as..." A startling discovery was made after more research with his bugs. "I think I've located the robots. They appear to have been released from a number of ramps buried throughout the simulation, and they are all underground. However, it probably wouldn't count if I simply went there and began destroying them. Hey, let's talk. Do you have any? I wonder why Present Mike is up there." His bugs detected movement from a tower to his left. "Unless..." "All right, get started." The spectacled boy whirled around in bewilderment, but Izuku immediately acted, pulling his Eskrima sticks from behind him and charging into the city. "Aha, that's what I'm referring to. Someone here is familiar with the situation." Present Mike made the announcement while glancing at the other pupils. "All right, for what reason are you waiting? Real fights do not have countdowns. Go, 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 the decision has been made." The approaching stampede fled to join Izuku as the students jolted out of their daze. Even though Izuku enjoyed exploring the details of the mock city, he had to give it to UA. The simulation was intricately detailed and realistic. His bugs discovered that every building he had run past was designed room by room and with amenities. The alleys were full of trash, and some streets displayed signs of weathering and usage. The rooftops even shared in the trash pileup and puddle holding. "Okay, two-pointer about 9 yards in front of you on the next left turn into the alley." The robot was indeed visible when turning the corner, its legs protruding and its robotic tail raised well above its body, and it turned toward the movement it detected down the alleyway. The robot resembled a scorpion. Eyeing the head and possibly the legs, Izuku ran toward the creature, scanning for any possible weak spots, and soon he was within a few feet of the metal device. The target was reached. The two-pointer lunged for Izuku, but the boy was prepared, and he swiftly ducked to the left, narrowly avoiding the roaring robot as it sped by. Start elimination. Izuku took a chance and ran up onto the robot's backside and onto its head, and after a couple of well-placed and forceful swings at the robot's delicate orb, he was able to disable it from combat. 2 points. The robot's speed, unable to anticipate the miss, rammed it into a nearby dumpster, temporarily stunning it. Actually, that wasn't that bad. It was surprisingly delicate for a robot, but I guess that makes sense given that The robot appeared to be more robust as well, judging by its bulkier form and second head, strength and speed combined, then. Much harder than the two-pointer, worthy of its title. Izuku's eyes widened. He again took evasive action, this time moving to his right. He had sensed a three-pointer nearby with his bugs, but was unprepared for the insane speed that it had demonstrated. It's been 8 minutes. Present Mike yelled. Shoot, I have to hurry this up. Already. Izuku looked at the three-pointer, who seemed to be happy to wait for him to move. He looked at its form, which suggested that his weapons might not be very effective, and then at its head, which was responding to his ping with a red orb. That's it. Izuku grabbed his bugs and gathered them in a cloud before launching them onto the robot's red orb. The three-pointer responded by flailing wildly and, as Izuku had predicted, losing vision, which made it easier to reach its back in the area between its heads. The robot crumpled shortly after as its circuitry was damaged, earning 5 points. He chuckled slightly and said, I can do this, I really can. But I need to hurry. Time's running down. He then ran off in a different direction. I guess I can ask my bugs to work a little harder for the time being, which is fortunate that I spent so much time inventing with Mei. There was a dark monitoring room in a different area of the UA campus, full of staff members and various pro heroes, who watched the throngs of students as they crashed into the robots that were sent into their course. Given the makeup of the crowd, it didn't take long for some of them to notice a certain green-haired boy. Hey, why are those sticks there? Vlad King, the blood hero, inquired, are they involved in any kind of martial arts? An inquisitive observation, Sekijiro-kun, Nezu said. That would be a screama, if I'm not mistaken, a martial art that has since declined as quirks have become more commonplace. The principal glanced at the boy with the green hair and leaned forward in his chair a little. But, unless his quirk involves them, we have yet to actually see him use his quirk, Ectoplasm said. What is it listed as? Present Mike complied by hurriedly going through the files of the different prospective students they had. Let's see, Awase, Garo, Jiro, Kuwaro, aha. Midoriya, let's see, he is described as, quirkless here. The judge's responses to the news ranged from incredulity to curiosity, with the current All Might displaying particularly deep curiosity after recognizing the boy. That's odd, he thought, he has a quirk, he showed me, explaining why his file listed him as quirkless. The number one hero noticed that Nezu was the only person who continued to pay attention to the boy in spite of the chaos. What's on your mind, Nezu? All Might inquired. A quirkless, the principal said, nodding. Maybe not. Do any of you have any bugs? Bugs? All Might inquired, recalling the demonstration that Midoriya had shown him, but he hadn't noticed anything comparable in terms of the screen displays. Yes, jolted from their hidden homes, all over the simulation. They have been making deliberate movements. Some of our robots have even been disabled. Does anyone on the list have any kind of bug control, Yamada-kun? Present Mike moved through the files once more and said, there's one student, with the quirk Anavoice. One of the screens showed a student who had peach-colored skin and looked like a rock. The boy was distracting the robots he was fighting by attracting birds. Present Mike went on, basically, control over animals, as shown. However, he is at Site C. No one is here at Site B. With his hands raised above his head, Nezu hummed, and so our mystery was solved. The boy who is said to be quirkless actually has a quirk. And, I think, a pretty special one. How strange it all is. The principal grinned ferociously and said, I really hope he passes. A one-pointer robot was easily neutralized when 2 Eskrima sticks fell upon it. 30 minutes, Present Mike reverberated, and that's number 21. Not bad, if I may say so myself. Izuku surveyed his surroundings, seeing other participants panting in exhaustion from the battle they had fought, and numerous other robotic remains smearing the background. Izuku was confident in his score, but he was still a little concerned because he had heard scores in the 40s a while back, which made him nervous. Would his 21 points be enough to pass? He certainly hoped so, or else Mei would beat him late. Izuku was literally shaken out of his reverie by a deep rumbling shake. As a massive figure emerged from the smoke and ashes, explosions shattered the cityscape, and in a matter of seconds, the zero-pointer was in full glory, looming over the nearby buildings. Well, isn't that a bit too large? The giant turned and started to slowly advance toward the students, and the different faces of Site B started to flee from the beast, scared of the seemingly insurmountable obstacle. The terrified boys and girls moved like a stream around a rock past the motionless Izuku, who just stood there and stared at the robot. Interesting. Wow, there must be a huge way to take this down. Since it's a test component, it can't be impossible to neutralize. Perhaps its internal wiring. The gaps between the circuitry must be enormous, or at least large enough for my bugs to fit. It's possible that I could jam it or chew through the wiring, but that would take a lot longer than 2 minutes. Izuku's focus was disrupted by a high-pitched cry for assistance. Through the thin smoke layers, he caught a glimpse of a girl trapped beneath some debris, the same girl who, some time ago, caused some robots to float, using some kind of gravity manipulation, but it appears that she is unable to move the rock on her own. Has she reached her breaking point? Izuku moved forward, his legs seemingly moving on their own, as the robot drew closer and closer, threatening to crush the trapped situation. He started to gather his insects into a giant mass, conglomerating onto his position, and sent them towards the zero-pointer. After a few seconds of observation, half of them seeped into the only opening found through a port on its left arm, and the other half rose to its face, obstructing its orb's view. Unfortunately, that did little to deviate it from its current course. When Izuku finally spotted the hurt girl, he said, "Hey, don't worry. I'll get you out. Could you move some of the debris?" To which the girl replied, "Not much, I'm nearing my limit. I just need some help getting your leg out from under there, but that's okay. I can't possibly move that by myself. Can you use the rubble fragment on your leg to activate your quirk on my go?" She gave a nod. "All right, ready, set, go," Izuku said, placing his hands beneath the stone. Izuku struggled to lift the debris, and although his already strained muscles ached from the strain, the girl's quirk made the removal quick and easy. Oddly, though, the girl immediately started throwing up rainbows. Perhaps one of her parents had a rainbow quirk. After helping the girl stand up, Izuku started to move away from the encroaching zero-pointer, slowly guiding the limping girl along while advancing his bugs until they reached deeper into the robot's arm. After a few chewed-through wires and short-circuiting inspired by bugs, the arm finally managed to twitch, causing the robot to stop and try to raise its arm, which complied but did so while twitching intermittently. Shoot, it's still functional after all that. The robot will now just keep moving in our direction, crushing us. The only damage I've done to it so far is to blind it and, at most, shock its arm. And, to keep Izuku's involvement in vigilantism separate, a variety of insects and bugs started to stray from the robot's eye and gathered upon the twitching to form a humanoid shape. The first thing that caught the zero-pointer's attention once it was able to see again was the shape on its arm, and the figure immediately rose in flight and zoomed back from where the robot originally came from. The robot followed, having sought out the one responsible for its damaged arm. After stopping the robot from approaching them too closely, just a few more seconds and it would have been on them, Izuku sighed with relief and turned to face the girl next to him, who also sighed. "Time's up," a buzzer said in the distance. Present Mike yelled. Tired from all that, Izuku sat down beside the girl and gently placed her on some rubble, waiting for assistance. "Wow, that was close." Izuku turned to face the girl and remarked, "That robot nearly killed us." The girl chuckled and said, "Yeah, I would have been toast if it weren't for you and that other guy." She extended an arm in front of him and said, "By the way, thanks for that. My name is Oshacho Uraraka." Izuku accepted the extended hand with a smile and said, "It's a pleasure. Nice to meet you, Izuku Midoriya." The familiar sound of timbals roused Izuku, who got up from his lying position, rubbing his eye in a weary reaction to the improvised alarm, and tapped off the machine to his right, putting an end to the cicadas' soothing, lovely song. He had been working on something similar for a few months, but the sound wasn't from actual cicadas, not yet. A rather wilted tree stood just outside his window, and it was there, or rather in its roots, that Izuku had been raising a robust population of cicada nymphs that would emerge each summer. They belonged to his collection, which also included the big rectangular terrariums that now dotted his room, as well as small glass jars and tall cylindrical tubes. His collection had nearly supplanted his All Might memorabilia, but Izuku and the two shared the space, with each element occupying about half of his room, thus feeding his healthy obsession with both. After a short while, he inspected his room to make sure everything was in order and connected to the surrounding bugs to double-check the things that his human eyes were unable to see. Thankfully, a quick review revealed that his collection had encountered minimal issues during the night. After that, Izuku got up and went to open one of the terrariums, calling forth the two collective spiders from the tank and placing them on his bed. He then called forth the population that he had been gradually accumulating within his 3-block radius, which he had developed by controlling the golden orb weaver population in his area, guaranteeing their safe and steady growth, and he had an endless supply of materials for his prototypes with them. The separation was required to prevent the spiders from mauling one another over food and territory, but he wished there was a quicker way to collect them all that didn't take more than an hour. As the rest of his spiders arrived, Izuku turned his attention back to the golden orb weavers in front of him and started working on his costume once more. The costume was almost finished, its golden form gradually taking shape thanks to the labor of thousands of tiny bodies, and the spiders, golden threads had worn through several iterations of the suit, with the creatures currently occupying the 7th version Izuku had imagined. Before he searched his closet for additional materials, he took another look at the costume and discovered that he had used up more than he had anticipated on previous costumes. It appears that I ran out of the dye I wanted for this version of my costume. I will have to get more later. Izuku nodded, mentally noting that he would get more dye at the store later, and went to open his window as soon as he felt the first of his outside workers arrive at his windowsill. Numerous spiders entered his room, but the miniature swarm was only a preview of what would be visible as the hour passed. Izuku's thoughts still raced at the prospect of getting into UA, both in anticipation and unease over what he would hear upon receiving his letter, and he hoped that it was good news. He would be receiving the exam results today, but until then, he would amuse himself with his costume while the rest of his spiders went to work. About an hour into his costume making, Izuku sensed someone standing outside his bedroom door, and after a few fleeting glances, he realized it was his mother, preparing to open his door. Izuku would have been terrified long ago by the thought of his mother storming in and discovering the floors and walls covered in insects, and he would have thought of dozens of absurd things that could have happened. As his mother did when Izuku told her about his quirk, Izuku had eventually come to accept it in all of its peculiarities. Instead, he continued to focus on the task at hand, paying little attention to the door being opened. The chittering of insects behind the door, accompanied by thousands of spiders scattered throughout the room, made Inko Midoriya enter, though she was a little hesitant at first. While some worked on the golden costume, others waited for their turn on the sidelines. Izuku, who had long realized that his empathy for his bugs was part of his quirk and didn't hold it against anyone who was a little uneasy, saw right through Inko's best efforts to hide her discomfort, as she had done numerous times before. He dumbed down his quirk when his mother was around, but he never told her that he knew, since it would only add to her already heavy burden. When Izuku turned to face his mother, he noticed a few things. She was in the room now, and he hadn't noticed it at first, but it seemed like she was trembling. In her hand, he saw a letter, and his eyes widened. I guess I'll have to wait until later to finish my costume, but hopefully I'll be able to do it in time, assuming I'll need it at all. After dismissing his spiders, Izuku had them hide his costume beneath his bed while the others went back to their houses. Izuku, it has arrived, she cried out. Izuku went to get his letter, just took it, and went back to his desk. Inko appeared reluctant to go, but she knew that Izuku would initially have to handle the consequences on his own. She left, shutting the door behind her, and kept pacing just outside, which Izuku noticed. After a few tense moments, a clean cut was made at the seam, revealing a refined, metallic disc. Izuku scooted over to his table, a bead of sweat streaming down the side of his head, and one of his centipedes arrived at that moment, slowly chipping away at the envelope. Izuku swallowed, causing the centipede to extract the disc, and then the machine suddenly came on, making Izuku jump in his chair. As a projection, I am here. The number 1 hero's figure cried out. Young Midoriya, it's good to see you healthy and happy. Is he on here? This is a letter from UA, right? Why would? I came to this town to work at UA, but you wouldn't have known it during our brief encounter, as an instructor. All Might chuckled. Teaching at UA, All Might, You can only imagine how shocked I was to see how well you were performing on the test. It was truly remarkable, destroying those robots and anything similar. As well as your bugs. Ah, but that's not what you're waiting to hear now, is it? All Might laughed again. Don't you want to find out how your exam went? With a somewhat more reserved demeanor, All Might cleared his throat and said, well, I'd like to inform you, Midoriya, that you passed your written exam. Well, I believed that to be the case, but what about? However, you scored a total of 21 points on the practical exam. Given that you defeated a sizable percentage of the robots without your quirk, it's not particularly impressive, but it is what it is. Considering your 21 points, it was quite close. All Might, stop putting things off. The protagonist chuckled once more. But that wasn't all. What? You behaved like a real hero would have. Your courage in the face of impending danger was admirable. What sort of hero school, after all, would you? What if we disapproved of people who did the right thing and saved others? You have to risk your life for this job. Villa points were not the only criterion used to grade the exam the other day. All Might pointed to a display. Save points. Another fundamental element that we at UA. The hero paused and stared straight into the camera, saying, and how does this relate to you, you might ask? With his arms extended, All Might said, Izuku Midoriya, 30 points. 51 points in all. You'll be right behind the top 10. You succeed. Very remarkably so, the hero confirmed. The All Might's face lit up with a big smile. Come on, young Midoriya. This is your academic hero. Izuku smiled at his idol's picture. Yes, sir. Izuku had just said goodbye to Pony and Manga, who were in the next class over, 1B, when he stood in front of the door of classroom 1A. Now, eager to start high school, he stood in awe before the door and studied it, taking in its immense height. I suppose the school does make accommodations for people who have peculiarities related to gigantification. Izuku swallowed, then inhaled deeply. Nothing comes. Izuku reached for the doorknob, not wanting to peek inside before entering so he could surprise himself by discovering who his classmates were. The best course of action turned out to be that. He opened the door to a rather loud clamor of yells. Naturally, Bakugo and Engine Quirk are fantastic. Not wanting any more surprises, he sent his bugs around the room. His arrival and the faint buzzing he gave off seemed to alert most of his classmates to his presence, and that's when the Engine Quirk boy, who he had just learned was named Tenya Iida, approached him. Hi there, Tenya Iida is my name. Of Junior High Sume. Even though he was a little off-putting, it's best to be friendly now. My pleasure, Izuku Midoriya. Iida nodded rapidly. I'm so very sorry, there was more to examine, you noticed. I didn't know, I guess I miscalculated you. Sure, said Izuku. Is he referring to the rescue points? Oh, I guess we'll just leave it alone. Izuku had his insects watch his classmates. He couldn't exactly remember the others, but he knew that a few were definitely absent from the practical, such as the child with heterochromia, one of Endeavor's children, if he was not mistaken, and the French child wearing the belt. Oh, that hair is so long. It's you, Midoriya-kun. Our classes are the same. When he turned around, he saw Ochako Uraraka. Well, I guess I never told her that I was using my bugs to divert the zero-pointer. Izuku was about to make his disclosure when he noticed something strange outside the door. It wasn't another student, considering that the class was already full based on the number of seats and people in it, but rather a man in a yellow casing, a sleeping bag if he wasn't mistaken, with hair that was uncannily long like his owl. Oh, shoot, Midoriya-kun, is there something wrong? Uraraka asked, gesturing with her hand in front of Izuku's face. There was no other reason for Izuku to be there, and he remained silent, still processing the fact that Eraserhead was, of all people, probably his homeroom. Go somewhere else if you just want to make friends. The pro-hero was the center of attention. Izuku imagined the transformation of a caterpillar into a butterfly as the hero got out of his sleeping bag and said, "This is the hero course." You all were silent for a total of 8 seconds. There is not much time. You children lack sufficient reason, the man said in a sardonic tone. My name is Shota Aizawa, and I teach your homeroom. It's good to meet you, he added. After removing a uniform from his sleeping bag that resembled a cocoon, Aizawa said, "It's kind of sudden, but put this on and go out to the field." He then started to trot through the hallways in the direction of the field. My homeroom teacher is one of the few heroes who has witnessed my vigilante form in action. The year was going to be tense. Many of the students who had heard Aizawa speak were confused when Izuku and the rest of his class were suddenly informed that they were taking a quirk apprehension test on UA's field. Uraraka said, "What about the entrance ceremony?" From next to Izuku, "Orientation. If you're a hero, you don't have time for such slow events," sneered Aizawa. The freedom of school traditions is one of UA's selling points. Teachers also operate their classes on this principle. He looked around the classroom, and the students' uneasiness was heightened by the silence. "Bakugo." "Yes," the boy asked. "In the practical, you won first place, didn't you? In the softball throw at your previous junior high, what was your best performance?" 67 meters. He gave the boy the ball and said, "Then, now try it with your quirk." Bakugo grinned and positioned himself. "You can do whatever you want as long as you remain in the circle," Aizawa said. "Now go give it a try." Bakugo launched the ball after committing to some stretches. Die. The explosion sent the ball hurtling through the air in a spectacular arc as it blasted off. Izuku thought, "Die. Well, what else could I have hoped for?" After a few seconds of flight, the ball landed, and the screen that Aizawa held up showed that it had traveled 705.2 meters. As the students from 1A gathered to discuss the spectacle, one odd comment raised the topic of all the fun that could be had by using their peculiarities for the exercise, and Aizawa heard it and found it amusing. "It seems enjoyable, huh?" questioned the teacher. "You have 3 years to become a hero. Will you have that kind of attitude the entire time?" No one spoke. With a smile on his face, Aizawa made the decision to go on. "All right. Whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential and be punished with expulsion." Expulsion, the entire class exclaimed. "Welcome to UA's hero course." A 50-meter dash was the first exercise. A few competitors stood out, such as Iida, who had an engine time of 3 seconds, and Bakugo, who, dare he say it, had a time of slightly more than 4 seconds. Izuku, meanwhile, did not use his quirk for this particular task. He earned a respectable 6.15 seconds by simply using the physique he had developed over years of training. The grip test came next. Mezzo Shoji, who appeared to have multiple limbs that could change in response to his quirk, ultimately outshined everyone. Izuku gained a well-received 63 kilograms, while he achieved an impressive 740 kilograms. In contrast to those who passed the pit, such as the French child, Izuku did not go very far in the standing long jump. If only because his endurance held up well, Izuku received a respectable score for the repeated side steps. But not as good as the little kid with the purple balls. No one received a score nearly as high as his. Then the ball was thrown. Izuku eyed the space in front of him as he caught the ball from Aizawa at his turn. He made the decision to employ his quirk. Izuku summoned the flying insects in the vicinity and gathered them to his position. Izuku was approached by dozens of hornets, which landed on his head. The crowd let out a few gasps of fear in response to the action, but Izuku didn't take any notice. Izuku lifted the ball into the air and launched it forward by positioning the bugs around it. It took just over 30 seconds for the giant hornets to reach the edge of Izuku's range, as their average speed is approximately 40 km per hour. Aizawa's instrument registered 255 meters in total. Izuku gave a contented nod. Although it was far from Uraraka's infinity, no one could beat her score, just like with Shoji. Many of his classmates had gone into a stunned silence, with some even having their mouths hanging open, as Izuku turned to face his class. But the silence was short-lived. Deku. The class saw Bakugo hurl himself angrily in Izuku's direction. He was about to say, "What the hell? You better," when a white strip of cloth encircled his body. Bakugo struggled as he was restrained, despite the fact that Aizawa himself invented the capture device. Izuku exhaled a sigh of comfort. He had no desire to engage in combat with Bakugo in front of his peers. It would give the incorrect impression. Bakugo observed, "These cloths are hard. They're weapons for capture made of carbon fiber, woven together with metal fabric made of a special alloy," said Aizawa. "Bakugo," Aizawa merely cautioned. The instructor released the boy from his grasp. He turned indifferently. "And don't make me keep on using my quirk. I have dry eye," he said. "Whoever's next, head on up." Izuku walked away to join the rest of his class after giving his old friend a glare. Bakugo kept growling as he returned to the crowd and eyed the one he had long since decided was useless. From that point on, the remainder of the test went rather smoothly. Izuku's endurance carried the majority of the load during the long run. In order to lessen the force required to move forward, he did have the assistance of his insects. He was the third to last off the track, but it wasn't much. Sit-ups was an easy exercise because Izuku did it frequently as part of his routine. Izuku easily outperformed the average in the seated toe touch test. Finally, it was time to see the outcomes. A large portion of the class stood in fear of the outcome. Before long, Aizawa disclosed where each person was placed. Izuku discovered who he was. 11th overall. Oh no, barely missing the top 10 once more. There seems to be a pattern here. There was a little whimper from the shortest child in the class, the one with the sticky purple balls for hair. Well, that must be number 20. Mineta Minoru. Aizawa glanced at the purple ball-headed boy and said, by the way, I was lying about the expulsion. It was a ruse. A girl pointed out how blatantly obvious the ruse was. There were still others who were taken aback. Mineta, said Aizawa. The students held their breath in anticipation of what might happen next. By contrast, the boy jumped in surprise. Aizawa left the students to their own devices and said, that doesn't mean you're off the hook. I'll be going over detention with you tomorrow. With the exception of Mineta, who was restless, the class exhaled in relief. Izuku, doubting himself, took care of the leaving teacher. Since that night's encounter with Aizawa, he had been studying him. Additionally, his study demonstrated Aizawa's propensity to expel pupils, particularly his behavior from the previous year. I do not think the expulsion was a sham. That's not the kind of thing Eraserhead would lie about. What made him change his mind, then? Izuku met Manga and Pony in front of the school. Mei told them to go away since she had made up her mind to stay and work on her inventions. After discussing the specifics of the day, the three of them started to leave for home. Manga exclaimed, you guys got to test out your quirks. Pony and I had to sit through the ceremony. We did nothing. Absolutely nothing. We got to see a bunch of pro heroes, though. That was fun, Pony said. You did, Izuku said. Pony and Manga both gave him a funny look. Izuku was about to say, I mean, when a hand touched his shoulder. He turned and saw that the hand belonged to Tenya Iida. Iida. Midoriya, I'd like to apologize to you again. I greatly misjudged you during the practical. Seeing you today on the field shows how wrong I was. It's no problem, Iida. Bakugo does leave an impression on people. Me sitting next to him probably added to that. Manga said, oh, who's this? A classmate? Yes, I am Midoriya's classmate, Tenya Iida. Nice to meet you. Manga gave a nod. Hello, hey, Midoriya-kun, are you going to the station? Wait up. The four of them turned to see Uraraka sprinting toward them. Uraraka, Izuku asked. Hi again, she said, gesturing to Izuku. She looked at the three others. I'm Ochako Uraraka, nice to meet you. After everyone had finished introducing themselves, Uraraka turned back to Izuku. By the way, why did that boy named Bakugo call you, Deku, during the test? Uraraka, Iida, and Izuku all nodded when Manga asked, you aren't saying that you all share a class with Bakugo, are you? Gosh, Izuku, I'm sorry to hear that, Manga said. Why? Iida raised an eyebrow. What is the past between Bakugo and Midoriya? Izuku said, it's a long story. In summary, Bakugo calls me, Deku, to make fun of me. Since we were young, he has been doing it. So, an insult, Iida pondered. Uraraka said, oh, I'm sorry. Deku, kind of sounds like, you can do it. I sort of like it, then. Izuku acknowledged, I suppose it kind of does, but he added, I'd rather not be reminded of it. Or, for that matter, Bakugo. Uraraka nodded and said, I apologize for that. So I guess I'll continue to be with Midoriya-kun. The five of them then left to go to the station. With her upper body buried in one of her inventions, Mei's voice echoed, so, how's class? With steady response, Izuku said, it's alright. I suppose. Mei stuck her hand out of the device and said, wrench. Izuku handed Mei a pipe wrench from the table in compliance. How so? Asked Mei. Well, there's this one girl. She's pretty nice, I guess. Though, that's probably an all-encompassing thing she has with everyone, if I'm going to be honest. Flathead. Izuku gave her the screwdriver. Izuku didn't elaborate beyond saying, then there's this other guy. I'm pretty sure he's related to Ingenium. Mei stopped and glanced at Izuku. She hummed as she returned to her device's work. That's it. What do you mean? Izuku asked. What do you mean? What do I mean? You mean to say that you met a pro hero's sibling, and you neglected to question them about it? Izuku laughed nervously. Oh, I guess that does seem weird, huh? Well, it more has to do with Iida himself. He's kind of off-putting. Very serious-like. I'm still kind of holding off my judgment on him for now. Wrench. Combination. This time, Izuku replaced the instruments in Mei's extended hand. Izuku remarked, but, enough about that. On another note, you remember that blonde kid that we met in the park a couple months back? That jerk that kept spouting out that you were quirkless, you mean? Yeah, him. Apparently, he's in the same class as Pony in Manga. His name's Monoma. He's going to be knocked down hard by the two of them. I feel kind of sorry for him. Almost. Yeah, but that's the thing. He hasn't done anything, apparently. All he's done is take a few glances at them. Calculatingly, in Manga's words. Just sitting and looking. Nothing like he was in the park, acting like he wanted a fight or something. Mei cried out, strange. I wonder if... Oh, that reminds me. Izuku gave a startled jump. You guys are probably gonna do some fighting today. The only reason Majima-sensei left in such a hurry a while ago was because he forgot to finalize all the stuff for the hero course costumes. Wah, really? Yes, really, said a voice from the doorway of the workshop. Looking toward the door, Izuku saw a short man encircled by a yellow, metallic device. Izuku recognized the man in front of him right away. Power Loader Sensei. Izuku was shouting. Power Loader said, Midoriya, and nodded. I hope Hatsume hasn't been overworking you too much. No sir, I'm sort of already used to working with her, anyways, so it's nothing different than how it was before. Power Loader trotted around the room, examining every nook and cranny between each desk and chair, and said, as I heard. He nodded to himself when he was finished. Everything seems to be in order. Yeah, said Midoriya. You sure it's alright for me to be here? It kind of seemed like a rushed decision a while ago, when you said yes. Power Loader replied, glancing at Izuku. Oh, I'm sure, Midoriya. Hatsume spent all of yesterday after class whining about not having her assistant. Heck, I can already tell that you can act as a neutralizing agent if Hatsume gets too extreme. It'd probably save me from a couple headaches. It's a shame that she ruined the surprise for you, though. You would have been told about the battle trial by All Might himself. All Might, Power Loader said. I said too much, and shook his head. You know, I've had students like Hatsume before. They're the type who won't give up until they get what they want. You got that right. Nothing gets in between me and my babies. Mei shouted. You see, chuckled Power Loader, there wouldn't be a point in denying her. She wants the workshop to work on her own stuff on her own time. Sure, she wants her assistant to help. Only on non-curricular oriented projects. She wants to build a giant mecha capable of lobbing nuclear warheads. That's where I draw the line. Mei's attempt to persuade, you should just do what he says. Agree with what he says Izuku. Took place. But, besides, if you truly do anything too bad, I'll just snitch on you to Aizawa. You got that? Why, yes sir. Izuku gave a forceful shake of his head. Good, now get going. Class starts in 10 minutes. Izuku turned his head in the direction of the clock. Izuku exclaimed, you're right. Have a nice day, Power Loader Sensei. Bye Mei. As he hurried from the classroom. Power Loader was reprimanded, you too Hatsume. Back to the regular classroom. But Sensei, what happened to doing as I said? Bu. No buts. In any case, Midoriya's previously mentioned surprise was ruined. Not entirely because of Mei's loose lips, but rather because of his own bugs. A debuffed All Might had been spotted by his flies coming out of what Izuku thought was the hero's office. The man changed into the symbol of peace in a puff of smoke while wearing his Silver Age costume. Oh, so awesome. The hero halted just outside the basic hero training door after racing through the hallways. I am coming through the door, like a normal person. The number one hero's enormous voice proclaimed. The students were immediately in awe of All Might as his personality lit up the classroom. The discussion of combat training further captivated the class as All Might continued to go over the specifics of the hero basic training course. And now, we have these. He said, pointing to the side of the room where shelves came out of the wall with ease. Your costumes were approved and/or based upon the specifications you sent in 3 weeks ago. After you change, we meet at ground beta. Looking down at his costume, Izuku gazed. He had submitted the piece for approval 3 weeks prior. That in his quirk registration, anyway. Initially, there was a slight issue with registration. The document had reminded him that he still looked like none when it came to what his quirk was, something he hadn't considered in a long time. When he was trying to think of a name for his quirk, he worked himself into a frenzy. Like Eraserhead had said, entomopathy. Something like Eye of the Swarm, something gimmicky. In the end, he simply chose bug control. After all, he could alter it later. Thus, he found himself at UA with his costume prepared for its debut. He examined his creation, which was made of reinforced dragline silk that was streamlined and intricately bound. The area where the silk covered the limbs was filled with a dark green that contrasted with the golden yellow. Alongside the golden torso were Izuku's reliable eskrima sticks on his back and a few pouches that were currently filled with spider silk that had been woven into thin ropes that could support his body weight. A pair of Mei-designed goggles rested on his head. Even though he didn't really need them, they were primarily for eye protection and part of Mei's demand. On the outside, she had crafted it to resemble the compound eyes of an insect, with thousands of photoreceptors creating a kaleidoscope effect. With his long hair and goggles, Izuku thought he looked a little like Eraserhead, though he didn't want to admit it. Now that Izuku considered it, it was a rather strange coincidence. Either that or a cruel twist of fate to make him realize how dangerous Aizawa was if he found out about his other identity. At least his costume's vivid hues avoided any further resemblance to the Erasure hero. However, that was a completely different story. He had to worry about school for the time being. With each of his peers wearing a different costume, Izuku ventured out into the open air. He was called out rather quickly, which was unexpected. Midoriya. Izuku looked in the direction of the voice. Why is her costume so revealing? He asked. We haven't been properly introduced yet, have we? Momo Yaoyorozu, a pleasure to meet you. She held out her hand. Izuku gave it a shake. A pleasure. She gave a nod. I couldn't help but notice the material your costume is made of. It wouldn't happen to be spider silk, would it? Izuku looked up, startled. You can tell just by looking at it. She gave a nod. It's part of my quirk. I need to know the molecular makeup of things so I can make them. I've made spider silk before, so I know how it's like. But I must admit, I never would have been able to make something quite so exquisite. The weave of this must have taken some work to create. Oh, yeah, at least spiders work. Yours looks so cool, Midoriya-kun. Exclaimed Uraraka. Nothing like mine though. Izuku remarked. Well, I think it looks great. Really, thanks. All right, class, All Might said. The group of students turned to him, their voices trailing off as they listened to the hero. Now, it is time for battle training. Sensei, said Iida. This is the battle center from the entrance exam, so are we undergoing urban battles again? I wonder how frequently he interrupts everyone in that way. Did he believe that All Might be planning something related to that? No, we are moving ahead 2 steps. All Might then gave a brief overview of villain facts and statistics, giving the class a pleasant little context for the situation they were about to be put in. For this class, you'll be split between teams of 2, heroes and villains who will fight indoor battles. The class erupted in questions about everything from expulsion to how this activity would proceed to how fashionable a particular purple cape was. All Might chose not to respond to any. Instead, he took out a small booklet and started outlining the structure of this class. A pamphlet. Oh, he would be a new teacher, I guess. Particularly to high school pupils. All Might finally reached the part where he announced that we would be paired up by drawing lots. Iida cried, they're being picked so haphazardly. You never know who you might have to get teamed up with in the field, Izuku explained. Ultimately, the class selected lots, and each student was assigned to a team. The girl with the tongue protruding from her mouth in the green costume was paired with Izuku. Izuku raised a hand to shake hands and introduced himself. The girl reciprocated. Her words were, Suyu Asui, ribbed. I often say what's on my mind. Good to know, Asui. Call me Su. Izuku stopped to think about what she had said. All right. Izuku looked at the other teams, assessing them and devising counter-strategies. When he learned that Bakugo had been paired with Mineta, he suppressed a small laugh. First up, teams A and C. Team are the heroes, Team C the villains. Bakugo and Mineta, who were assigned to Team C, walked confidently into the building. Aoyama and Todoroki made up Team A. The conflict didn't prove to be a difficult fight. Todoroki seemed to surprise even Bakugo by freezing the entire building. Izuku commended him for that, despite the fact that the ensuing irate shouts and profanities were becoming a little annoying. With hesitation, All Might said, "Alright, Teams D and E. We are Team D." Izuku gave All Might a look. He still seems a little put off by Bakugo. Well, Team D will be the heroes and Team E will be the villains. Asui nodded when Izuku said, "Looks like we're heroes then." Mioriya-kun, good luck. Uraraka shouted, "The same is true." Iida said, "Good luck." With a nod, Izuku said, "Thank you, guys." Honta Siro, who could shoot tape out of his arms, and Mezzo Shoji, who had limbs that could change shape, made up Team E. All Might led both teams the entire way as they approached the building they were to use. "Team Villain, go ahead and set up," said All Might. "The battle will start in 5 minutes when the heroes break in." All Might then sped back to the monitoring room. When they were by themselves, Asui said, "Midoriya-chan." The familiarity caused Izuku to raise an eyebrow. "Yes. Your peculiarity, you're in charge of bugs." Izuku just gave a nod. "All right, frog is my peculiarity. I can basically do anything that a frog can do." "I thought so," Izuku pondered. "So you wouldn't mind facing Siro anyway, would you?" "I would prefer not to compete with someone who is more agile than I am." She ribbed, "I can do that," and took out the building's map so she could examine its interior. "Oh, we don't have to stress over learning the layout of the building. I can help you get through it." Asui put a finger to her lips and said, "I assume with your bugs." "Huh." Izuku collected flying insects outside the building's openings, prepared to enter once allowed. "I'll send in a pair of dragonflies in your heat." A whistle blew, signaling the beginning of the battle, and Izuku sent in his bugs first, looking around the inside of the building. The second floor is where Siro is. It appears that he concealed the hallways and stairway, using them to his benefit. In the midst of it, he is hiding. "Do the hallways have room at the top?" Asui inquired. "Well, apparently so. A foot or two, roughly. I can climb on the ceiling, then." "You're right, you can. Carries out frog-like tasks." "Gotcha." "Shoji's on the 3rd floor," the insect said as they proceeded through the building. "He seems to have his ear to the ground." A few more spinning in midair. Izuku cocked his head thoughtfully. "You got it. We can enter now." Asui leapt on, walked along the building's exterior walls, paused in front of a window on the 2nd floor, and watched the 2 dragonflies that swarmed up next to her before following them as they entered. Izuku, meanwhile, eyed the 3rd floor and had a plan to implement. "Hello, Shoji." Shoji turned and gazed out the window, where a figure of insects and bugs floated, wriggling and crawling all over each other. A faint buzzing sound filled the air as tiny jaws snapped and wings fluttered, and Shoji pulled all his limbs back to himself, turning the enhanced eyes and ears on their ends back into arms. The bugs, chittering, which sounded exactly like Izuku Midoriya's, said, "I suggest that you surrender now. It would save you from a load of discomfort, if you did." The buzzing grew harsher and louder until it filled Shoji's ears. After descending from its position in the air, the figure entered through the window and touched the floor. It moved slowly in Shoji's direction, each step collapsing back on itself as the bugs made ripple-like movements on the floor, but it quickly got back up again. It stopped a few feet away from Shoji, tilting its head and crossing its arms, seemingly in anticipation. It was quickly clear why it stopped. The downed Honta Siro, the speakers said, "The hero team has secured a capture. Your teammate has already been taken out. You won't have a fallback option." Shoji looked at the crowd before him as he responded to the announcement. Shoji assumed a fighting stance and declared, "I will not surrender, Midoriya. If we are to fight, we will fight." The bugs chuckled and said, "If you say so." Insects hiding in the room's corners and crevices joined the movement, all aiming to fall on the boy. Shoji tried to run, to get out of the clutches of thousands of tiny feet before they were upon him, but he didn't make it far. He was covered in seconds, his yells of surprise lost in the cacophony of buzzing. The mass of bugs suddenly collapsed in on itself, falling onto the floor. Shoji scrunched his eyes in confusion, scanning the mass until they opened wide in realization. The monitoring room was completely silent. Only a few seconds earlier, Everyone had been talking about the terrifying battle between Shiro and Asui and the Frog Girl's subsequent triumph. They were particularly excited about how Asui's covert entrance through the ceiling caught Shiro completely unprepared and guaranteed his swift defeat. After that, there was the fight between Shoji and Midoriya, which was quite impressive. All Might and the majority of Class 1A were now stunned by the display that Midoriya had placed in front of them. They could still clearly recall the image of the insect figure and how it fell on Shoji. Some were displaying curious expressions, while another was snarling with rage. The silence was broken by Mina Ishido, who said, "That was definitely something." Uraraka muttered, "Yeah, wasn't that a bit excessive?" Iida inquired. "Huh," said Denki Kaminari. "You know, if he had been on the villain team rather than the, ow, that display would have fit his image much better." He felt a sharp pain at his neck and yelled. Kyoka Jiro scolded her teammate, pulling back his ear jack, saying, "Don't be an ass." All Might glanced up at the monitors and said, "Oh. The bomb has been taken over by Team D. Heroes prevail." "What?" questioned the class. They looked up at the monitors, and there stood Izuku next to the bomb, hand outstretched and touching the fake explosive device. How did he get there? In the past, Izuku turned around and headed toward the rear of the building. He instructed his two dragonflies to turn left, and Su took a left, then a right, and finally a left. She would soon be on Shiro. Izuku concentrated on the task at hand, looking up at the fire escape that provided him with a rear entrance to the building. However, there was only one issue. If Izuku were to ascend the steps, the metal of the staircase would make too much noise, and the ears Shoji had listening to his surroundings would detect his steps long before he reached the second floor. Furthermore, Izuku didn't feel particularly prepared to engage in physical combat with someone who weighed 540 kilograms. However, he had a strategy to get around that. On the third floor, Izuku started to shape his bug figure, this time in his own image. He said, "Hello, Shoji." Shoji swiftly turned, turning his limbs back into arms, and Izuku saw through his bugs. Bingo! Izuku started to talk through his bugs and slowly ascended the stairs while creating the least amount of noise possible. "I advise you to give up right away. If you did, you would avoid a great deal of discomfort." He increased the number of insects that made their characteristic buzzing noise, and he sped up a bit to keep up with the commotion. He finally made it to the top, but, like with his bug decoy, he stopped himself from going any farther and waited outside for Su to defeat Shiro, hesitating just enough to make Shoji doubt himself. The downed Honta Shiro, a capture has been made by the hero team. He paused, then spoke again through the bugs. Izuku, who had no idea what was going to happen, laughed a little at Shoji's statement, and the laughter permeated the bug's speech. Izuku carried out the next part of his scheme. The bug decoy fell to the ground, then rose, moving deliberately, and descending on the boy with the tentacles, his voice muffled by his bugs. Now that Shoji was neutralized, Izuku just walked into the room, funding himself in front of the fictitious bomb, grinning and putting his hand on it. "This is becoming thrilling. Shall we go on with this now?" "So, Monoma, Midoriya," the boy said, his face displaying a smug expression. "Why are we repeating this?" At lunchtime, Izuku was flanked by Manga and Pony, while Mei was in the workshop once more, working on another of her inventions. Sitting across from them was a rather arrogant-looking Monoma, who appeared to be composed and had his entire speech prepared, but Izuku could tell that the boy in front of him was nervous despite his calm exterior. "Pony and Manga said you were sorry?" Izuku asked, almost incredulously. "Yes," he said, almost grudgingly, "I misjudged you that day in the park, you see." He paused, as if to rethink his statement, and his image cracked slightly as he faltered. He said, "If I'm to be honest, it was an honest mistake." His smug smile returned, and his facade was as strong as ever. "An error?" Izuku inquired, and a few insects emerged from his hair and settled next to his head. 3 hornets buzzed, urging Monoma to go on. Monoma nodded. "I didn't think you were that strong. However, it was evident. Yesterday, at the battle trials for my class, I discovered the strength of your friends, who are my classmates. They deserve to be here at UA because they are real warriors. After controlling their altercations, I realized that you were the one to blame. Only someone with that level of strength could inspire such a group to achieve such success and proficiency." Izuku took a moment to process everything Monoma had told him. He accepted the excuse for the time being, but then he had another question. "What about that little altercation you had in the park?" That I was. Quirkless, what was that? The hornets landed on the table space in front of him, close to Monoma, Izuku said, cautioning him to be careful with his next words. Yes, you see, my peculiarity is that, when we come into physical contact, I can mimic the peculiarities of others. As long as I use each quirk separately and not all three at once, I can copy up to 3 at once. The hornets drew nearer in reaction to the half-answer. How is your expressive vernacular related to that? Izuku spoke in a foreboding manner. That's what's strange here, Monoma said with ease. I touched you that day in the park, and I didn't feel a connection. There was no spark that connected your quirk to anything. Nothing but a void, a vast emptiness. It was like how I feel when I touch other people who don't have any peculiarities. But simultaneously different in a way that defies explanation. Izuku furrowed his brow in perplexity. You claim that you were unable to sense my peculiarity. Exactly, Monoma said, shaking his head. I couldn't sense any. That's the reason I called you. I did that. Therefore, I truly regret all of the trouble I've caused. I guess I can trust him, but what's so special about my quirk that he wouldn't be able to sense it? I appreciate your candor, Monoma. But if I later discover that you're lying, or something like that. Monoma flinched slightly as the hornets lunged at him, but the insect stopped before they could touch him, instead buzzing dangerously near his face. Yes, I am aware of that. With all your fury, you will unleash your swarm upon me. Monoma said sarcastically, I shall regret the day I dared to defy you. His facade was back up, and the previous flinch seemed to have never happened. The hornets flew back into Izuku's hair, and he said, Good. Glad you understand. Lunchtime was interrupted by the sound of a siren. A level 3 security breach has occurred. The PA system said, all students, please evacuate outdoors as soon as possible. Aside from the screeching sound of the alarm, everyone was initially silent. However, as the rumble of feet hitting the ground filled everyone's ears, panic broke out. The security alarm system is the cause. It indicates that there has been trespassing on school property. In my 3 years here, I have never witnessed anything like this. Someone gave an expositional explanation. Is that the true purpose of this? As the crowd around him started to panic, Izuku stayed in his seat and signaled to Manga, Pony, and yes, even Monoma, to sit still. All three obeyed, though the third did so grudgingly. In order to find out what all the commotion was about, Izuku connected to his swarm and used the ants near the school's entrance. Many of the ants had taken up residence underground, away from the 100 or so feet stomping on the ground, and a little scrying showed that the media that had been swarming around the entrance in the morning had managed to get past the school's barrier. So it's not a real emergency. It must be a glitch in the security system. He peeked with his ants once more and saw Present Mike and Aizawa stifling the eager reporters. I guess it would be better to calm the masses. Calling upon his insects once more, Izuku gathered them above the cafeteria's exit, causing another round of panic as students screamed at the approaching horde of insects. Izuku instantly forgot that some people weren't exactly comfortable with insects flying past their heads and feet, but he still carried out his plan. There is no need to worry, the large group of insects said, forming the words, stop. Do not panic. In the air, the majority of the students appeared to be drawn to the message, which momentarily stopped the stampede. The media people who were swarming the entrance this morning are the only ones who are intruding. There is nothing to be concerned about. Present Mike and Eraserhead are currently handling the situation, the bugs uttered in unison. The discovery calmed the students, and soon everyone was back to their regular routines. A few of the more rule-abiding students continued their march outside, but the majority went back to the cafeteria to resume their lunch. At that point, a couple of students actually looked out the window, confirming what Izuku's bugs had announced. Uraraka and Iida, who had taken a different seat when they noticed Izuku and Monoma meeting, moved away from the crowd and approached Izuku as the commotion subsided. Mioriya-kun, wow, you used your bugs in a really cool way, Uraraka cried out. If those bugs were yours, that is. Unless another student is in possession of some kind of bug control. Iida inquired. Izuku called a few of the bugs back to himself, and their bodies took up residence in his hair once more. Nope, they were mine, he said, shoving the bugs back outside. In that instance, well done, Midoriya. Iida remarked, I was certain that I had chosen the right candidate for class representative. Yes, well done, class representative. Uraraka cried out. Oh, I forgot about that. To be honest, Izuku was pretty confused by the results after his class used anonymous voting to select a class representative and deputy representative. Yaoyorozu received 3 votes, which put him in second place, while Izuku received several more votes, 6, to be exact, to be elected class representative. It was odd because Izuku didn't anticipate receiving any votes at all, and he personally voted for Yaoyorozu because, based on her brief introduction, he believed she was intelligent and had the proper demeanor to fill the role. The only people he had verified had cast ballots for him were Iida, Uraraka, and Asui. He corrected himself in his mind that Su had not. "You were elected class representative?" Pony asked in a low voice. Well, he turned to face Pony. "Yeah, I see," Izuku replied, "it just happened a while ago, so I haven't been able to tell you guys yet." "Huh, who would have known?" Manga replied. "Izuku voted as his class's representative." "Well, this has been nice and all," Monoma said, "but I think I should make an excuse." "Could I?" He turned to Izuku and requested permission to depart. Izuku and Monoma both nodded before returning to the seats where a sizable chunk of 1B was seated. Uraraka and Iida turned to Izuku and looked at the blonde boy inquisitively. "If I may ask, Midoriya, what was that about?" Iida inquired. "Oh, it's not that big. Just something that happened a few months ago at..." Izuku stopped suddenly, his output from some of his bugs making him a little confused. A black mist engulfed some of his bugs in another area of the school, and they were abruptly taken into what Izuku thought was a dilapidated bar. However, his connection to his bugs was severed before he could investigate the area further. "Strange," mumbled Izuku. "Izuku, something's off, buddy." "What?" Manga inquired. As Izuku's thoughts returned to the present and took root in his body, he turned to face Manga, who was standing next to him, and said, "Yeah. I mean, no, I believe. There's just something strange about my bugs. Most likely just, well, I'm not sure. It's nothing, though, most likely." Opening parenthesis katakana middle dot closing parenthesis. "If you say so, Izuku." Yeah, one more mystery to complement today's discoveries. The following day, Class 1A was given another surprise. Aizawa had announced that, in conjunction with their basic hero training class, they would be taking part in an off-campus exercise that would involve practicing rescue techniques, with the option to wear a costume or not. When it was time to leave for the site, Izuku picked up his costume and boarded the bus. Despite Iida's best efforts, his strict attempts to maintain order failed when the bus proved to be more opulent than it looked. It was spacious, with regular school buses having rows of seats, but there were also seats on either side, forcing students to sit face to face. This arrangement introduced the dilemma of conversation, and Izuku could easily guess what would be discussed given the events of the previous few days. "Midoriya," Kaminari responded, "I've got to admit, your quirk's a bit of a doozy." "Oh," Izuku's eyebrows went up. "Yes, and a little frightening as well." He hesitated, then hastily added, No offense, of course." Your quirk really is versatile, though," Sue replied. "Your dragonflies really helped to lead me to Zero," she complained. "Yeah, and it also helped you completely bury Shoji," Ashido softly acknowledged. "It must be capable of other things, right? Imagine what he can produce. Think of a bunch of butterflies. It would be amazing," Aoyama added. "I am able to. I guess you do things like that. Finding enough of one bug will allow me to command them all at once." Izuku illustrated his point by calling forth the 2 fireflies he had concealed in his hair, which lighted up and started their own little light show. All of a sudden, the people around him were staring at Izuku in shock. "What?" As the fireflies carried on with their performance, he asked. "Oh, how wonderful. However, I have to ask, are you always so organized?" Izuku gave the question a startled look. "I believe he wants to know if those fireflies truly came from your hair." Ashido inquired. "Yeah, there are always some bugs in my supply. Well, just in case." Nonplussed, Izuku said. Ashido exclaimed. "Well, for that alone, I think you're pretty manly." Kirishima interrupted. "I doubt I could tolerate being so near so many bugs." "How do you manage it?" "How can I go about it?" Izuku hesitated and said, "I'm not quite sure what you mean. However, I guess I could say that I'm naturally good at it. Something along the lines of, the bugs are my friends." As an example, Kirishima hardened his arm and said, "Wow. Being able to brave through it all. Just like that, man, I'm kinda jealous. If you play it out right, you could get a whole lot of popularity. Unlike my own quirk, hardening, which isn't too flashy. Izuku remarked, "Oh, I don't know about that, you can easily be a pro with your hardened skin. You'd be like a bruiser, in that regard. A melee combatant who soaks up the damage. You'd be in the eye of the media just like that, taking up hits in a fight." "A bruiser?" inquired Kirishima. "I haven't heard of that term before." "Oh, yeah, it's, actually a video game term. A friend of mine kinda likes to go on about that kind of stuff. I thought that the term fit. Seems like his hobby talk has sorta bled into my vocabulary." Izuku gave a headshake. "Never mind that. On the other hand, I'm not a frontline combatant. I'd much rather stay in the shadows, using my bugs remotely. I wouldn't actually show up on TV all that much. Unless I'm doing something wrong, anyway." "Really?" inquired Kirishima. Nothing all too flashy for me that the public has to see. However, I can see a couple super moves for you. Perhaps someone can launch you at an enemy, like a human bullet. Or your armor, for example. It's based on your stamina level, right? I can guarantee you that you haven't reached your limit in regards to how much armor can cover your body." "Wow, you really hyper-analyzed me, didn't you? You even got that part about my stamina correctly." Kirishima gasped. "Thanks for the tips, Midoriya." Izuku gave a nod. "You've thought long and hard about stuff like this, haven't you, Midoriya?" Iida replied. "You even have usages for Kirishima's quirk figured out." Izuku gave a shrug. "I suppose. I mostly analyzed all your guys' quirks during the battle trial." "Scary," said Ashido. Unexpectedly, she said, "Wonder how far in you've thought about all of us, EH." Iida remarked, "Well, I'm impressed. A skill like that could go pretty far." Bakugo interrupted, shouting from a distance, "PFF'd. You think Deku there can amount to anything? All he can do is research others' quirks. He got lucky with tentacle arms the other day. But in a real fight, against somebody like me, I'd crush him." "Whoa man, kind of extreme," Kirishima's comment was. "What's your beef with Midoriya, anyways? Aizawa Sensei had to stop you the other day when you were running at Izuku the other day during the ball toss. And what's with Deku? What does that mean?" Bakugo did not respond. Instead, he sounded frustrated and peered out the window. To Ashido, "Wow, such a jerk." "Indeed," Sue replied. "He wouldn't get all that popular with an attitude like his." What did Frog Face say? "Hey, we haven't even begun interacting with one another yet, and you've already shown us how unpleasant your steam turd of a personality is," Kaminari chuckled. "Why is that vocabulary used? Do you want me to beat you up?" After Bakugo's tirades, the conversation slowed down a little, and instead of discussing Izuku's peculiarity, the subjects shifted to more commonplace subjects, such as how everyone was doing at school thus far or the fact that All Might was a teacher. However, as soon as the class reached the exercise site, the excitement started to increase once more. "Whoa, the place is similar to Universal Studios Japan." The teacher led the class out of the bus and through the doors of the large building, where they were met by a person dressed almost like an astronaut. "Oh," Izuku thought, "it's 13, the well-known rescue hero." "Hello everybody. Greetings from the unforeseen simulation joint, as I like to call it. It comes with every accident and disaster you can think of." Izuku's bugs were used to explore the different zones that 13 mentioned. The sites appeared to be a promising place to practice the class's rescue skills, whether it was the flood zone with its ocean aesthetics or the landslide zone with its steep terrain. The various zones were, in fact, very intricately detailed and looked almost like the real thing. Izuku noticed that Aizawa and 13 were speaking quietly outside of the classroom, so he moved his insects a little closer to them. "Where's All Might, 13? Isn't he supposed to be here?" inquired Aizawa. 13 put up 3 fingers and remarked, "It appears that he reached his limit during his commute this morning. They're fortunate that I already know about it, because otherwise they would be dealing with one inquisitive and nosy student. It appears that All Might used up all of his time." 13 continued by explaining his own quirk, Black Hole, and its potential lethality. Izuku was reminded of his own quirk by 13's explanation that, although being used for rescue, his quirk had the potential to kill. His own bugs undoubtedly had a variety of uses, some centered on neutralization and others that were almost lethal. Izuku's bugs saw a black swirl slowly growing in the middle of the room as 13 continued to babble, and he almost leapt to his feet when his bugs caught a glimpse of the hand-covered face peeking out of the hole. "Midoriya, is there something wrong?" Uraraka inquired. The swirl, The Black Mist had carried his bugs to a rather large warehouse full of different people, and the constricting manner of the mist was all too familiar to his bug's senses. Eventually, a few of Izuku's bugs got caught up in the swirl, leaving Izuku a little confused by the abrupt change. It's similar to yesterday's Black Mist, except this time there are a number of villains instead of a bar, so the media's intrusion was, what, a diversion? For what purpose? Obtaining information to break in. Dozens of the criminals were inside the USJ as more and more villains emerged from the fog. Isn't it 13 and Eraserhead? All Might was supposed to be here according to the class schedule 1 received the other day, the Black Mist inquired. This confirms that this individual was on campus yesterday, which makes sense. Izuku, who can take care of himself, ignored Eraserhead as he leapt down to defend the class and paid little attention to the speech. Izuku started to look around, noting any people who looked dangerous, which he would try to avoid, but he was stopped when the Black Mist appeared from behind him. A teleporter, then. Tricky. Greetings, said the dark figure, we are the League of Villains. Please pardon our bluster, but we have come to UA High School, this stronghold of bravery, to put an end to the life of All Might, the symbol of peace. The audience was taken aback by his announcement, and the students were shocked by his determined, certain-sounding plan to kill All Might. Izuku calmed. Focus. Back off. Bugs. Destroy All Might. That's quite the goal you guys have, Izuku remarked. The mist said, indeed it is. He then raised his arms. Be gone. The majority of the class was engulfed by the man's shadows as they burst outward. The last thing Izuku heard before fading into darkness was the threat, writhe in torment, until you breathe your last.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.